Chapter 26. The Art of Seeing Truth. Year 299 AC/8 ABY. Castle Black, the wall. The wall emerged from nothingness. A frozen wave caught mid-crash against the sky. Robb Stark squinted through the swirling snow, his gloved hands tight on the reins as his destrier struggled forward. The blizzard had descended without warning 3 leagues back, transforming their journey into a blind march through howling white. "Gods be good," Small John bellowed beside him, his voice nearly lost in the wind. There she stands. 700 feet of ice loomed before them, its surface glittering with frost despite the storm. Robb had heard the tales since childhood, but nothing had prepared him for the reality. The wall stretched beyond sight in both directions, a monument to ancient fear. Gray wind pressed against Robb's leg, a low whine escaping the direwolf's throat. The beast's hackles stood rigid, his yellow eyes fixed on the massive barrier. "What troubles you, boy?" Robb murmured, reaching down to touch the wolf's head. As his fingers brushed Gray Wind's fur, Robb reached for the force as Luke had taught him. He closed his eyes, letting his awareness expand beyond his physical senses. The world transformed. Each of his men became a point of light, their courage and exhaustion pulsing together. Gray Wind burned brighter, his presence intertwined with Robb's own. But beyond the wall, nothing. Where there should have been the song of countless lives, Robb sensed only emptiness, as if there was a void that simply felt hungry. Something lurked within that cold nothingness, watching and waiting. Robb's eyes snapped open, his breath catching. "My lord," Ser Wendell Manderly asked, his usually jovial face creased with concern. "Are you well?" "Fine," Robb lied, his voice steady. A lord could not show fear before his men. Just eager to reach Castle Black. The Black brothers had spotted them. A horn blasted once, the sound carrying clear despite the storm. The gates of Castle Black groaned open to receive them. "Make way for the Stark!" someone shouted as they rode into the courtyard. Men in black cloaks gathered around them, but it was a sorry sight compared to the armies Robb had imagined in boyhood tales. These were no noble defenders but criminals and cast-offs, thin-faced and hard-eyed. Some looked no older than Robb himself, while others were graybeards with missing fingers and limbs. Yet behind their weathered faces, Robb glimpsed something fierce and desperate, men who had found purpose in their exile. Gray Wind growled, circling close to Robb's horse. The direwolf's unease deepened Robb's own disquiet. "Lord Stark," a grizzled man with a shaved head stepped forward. "I'm Ser Alliser Thorne, Master-at-Arms. The Lord Commander awaits you in his tower." The Small John dismounted with a grunt. "Your hospitality overwhelms us, Ser Alliser," he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Robb shot Small John a warning glance as he swung down from his saddle. "We're grateful for shelter from the storm, Ser," he said. "My lords and I would speak with Lord Commander Mormont at once." "As you wish." Thorne's expression suggested he'd tasted something foul. "This way." The Lord Commander's tower stood taller than the surrounding structures, though it remained modest compared to Winterfell's towers. As they climbed the creaking wooden stairs, Robb sensed Gray Wind's growing agitation. The direwolf refused to follow, remaining in the courtyard despite the swirling snow. "Lord Robb Stark," Thorne announced as they entered Mormont's chambers, "and the many lords of the north." Jeor Mormont sat behind a scarred wooden table, maps spread before him. The old bear looked up, his weathered face betraying no surprise at their arrival. A raven perched on his shoulder, its black feathers ruffled against the cold. "Snow," the bird croaked. "Snow, snow." "Lord Stark." Mormont nodded toward the empty chairs. "I didn't expect to meet you so soon after your father, and with so many companions." Robb kept his face neutral as he took a seat. "My father rides for King's Landing to address certain concerns with the crown. As acting Lord of Winterfell, I felt it necessary to see the situation at the wall for myself." "Snow," the raven said again, hopping from Mormont's shoulder to the table. "Snow." The old bear reached for a flagon of ale and poured cups for each of them. "You've come at a grim time, my lord." The wildlings mass beyond the wall as never before. Mance Rayder calls himself king beyond the wall, and the free folk answer. "Then we must strengthen your defenses," Haryon Karstark said, leaning forward. "How many men do you need to hold the wall?" Mormont's laugh held no humor. "More than the north could spare, Lord Karstark. We have fewer than 1,000 men spread across 19 castles. Most stand abandoned." The small John slammed his cup down. My grandfather rode north when Raymond Redbeard crossed the wall. The Umbers and Mountain clans bloodied the wildlings at Long Lake. And we can do so again, Clay Serwyn added. Robb studied Mormont's face. The old man's eyes revealed more than his words. This was a test. The Lord Commander had dealt with green lordlings before and found them wanting. My lords, Robb said carefully, before we discuss battle plans, I would hear Lord Commander Mormont's full assessment. The raven hopped closer to Robb. Snow, snow, snow. Your uncle understood what we face, Lord Stark, Mormont said. Do you? Robb thought of his meditation that morning at Winterfell, the vision of blue-eyed corpses shambling through endless snow. He thought of his father's grim face when he spoke of Ser Waymar's corpse rising at Castle Black. The wildlings flee something worse than winter, Robb said quietly. My father witnessed it himself. The others have returned, and the dead rise to serve them. The chamber fell silent. Galbart Glover shifted uncomfortably, while Karstark's face hardened with skepticism. Tales to frighten children, Rickard Risswell muttered. I've seen a dead man walk, Mormont countered. So has your liege lord. Your ancestor built this wall to keep out more than raiders and giants. So you would have us ignore the wildling threat? The small John demanded. I would have you understand it, Mormont replied sharply. Mance gathers the free folk to flee south, not to conquer. Every wildling who dies north of the wall rises again with blue eyes. Robb closed his eyes, reaching into the Force. Luke had taught him to sense emotions, to find the currents of truth beneath spoken words. Mormont believed what he said. Fear and grim certainty radiated from him. But the northern lords bristled with pride and doubt. My lords, Robb said, opening his eyes, we must consider that the wildlings and the Watch share a common enemy. You suggest we allow savages past the wall? Harrion's voice rose. They've raided our lands for thousands of years. I suggest nothing yet, Robb replied evenly. First, we must see the evidence for ourselves. How many rangers have you lost, Lord Commander? Too many, Mormont answered. Your Uncle Ben-Jen among them. A pang of grief shot through Robb. Uncle Ben-Jen had always been kind to him, bringing gifts from beyond the wall and tales of rangers' exploits. I would send a ranging party, Mormont continued. Find Ben-Jen if we can, and learn the truth of what gathers in the Frostfangs. My lords and I will join this ranging, Robb declared. The chamber erupted in protests, from the northern lords wanting immediate action against the wildlings, from Mormont insisting the dangers were too great for Winterfell's heir. The decision is made, Robb said, rising to his feet. The force of his will pushed into his voice without conscious thought, a technique Luke had shown him for leadership. The arguments faltered. We ride in 3 days' time, after we've rested our horses and prepared supplies. Mormont studied him with newfound respect. As you command, Lord Stark, though your father may have my head for allowing it. My father left me to protect the North, Robb replied. I cannot protect what I do not understand. As the lords filed out, still grumbling among themselves, the raven suddenly launched from the table and landed heavily on Robb's shoulder. Its black eyes fixed on his, uncomfortably intelligent. Snow! It croaked, softer now. Fire. Blood. King. Robb felt a chill that had nothing to do with the chamber's temperature. Through the Force, he sensed something within the bird. A presence both ancient and aware, watching him with calculated interest. Not simply an animal, but something else entirely. The raven's head tilted, as though listening to thoughts Robb hadn't spoken. His beak opened again. Brother? It whispered. So quietly Robb nearly missed it. Mormont frowned. Strange. The bird rarely takes to strangers. I do have a way with animals, Robb joked, keeping his voice steady despite his unease. The raven's talons tightened briefly on his shoulder before it launched back toward Mormont. Robb couldn't shake the feeling that he'd just been measured by it. We should prepare for the ranging, Lord Commander, Robb said. The dead won't wait while we debate. Outside the tower, gray wind padded to Robb's side, yellow eyes fixed on the raven watching from Mormont's window. The direwolf's growl rumbled like distant thunder, confirming what Robb already knew. Something or someone is watching them. Winterfell, the north. Sansa stared at the smooth stone resting on her palm, willing it to rise. The afternoon sun filtered through the Godswood's canopy, dappling the ground with shifting patterns of light. For what felt like the 100th time, she envisioned the stone floating upward, picturing it suspended in the air as Master Luke had taught them. The stone wobbled slightly, rose perhaps the width of a finger, then clattered back onto her palm. "You're thinking too much," Arya said, crossing her arms. Her hair was windblown, her cheeks flushed from their earlier exercises. "The stone doesn't care about your perfect posture or pretty thoughts." "I'm trying," Sansa replied, unable to keep the frustration from her voice. "Not all of us can be naturally talented at everything." Arya snorted. "Naturally talented? I practice for hours when you're brushing your hair or stitching handkerchiefs." The stone trembled again as Sansa concentrated, her brow furrowing with effort. It rose perhaps 2 fingers' width before dropping once more. She'd been at this for nearly an hour, and had yet to hold it aloft for more than a few heartbeats. "Master Luke says the Force flows through everything," Bran said quietly from where he sat against the heart tree. "You're trying to control it like you'd control thread on a loom." "What would you have me do instead?" Sansa asked, unable to keep a note of irritation from her voice. Even Bran, her little brother, had surpassed her in these strange abilities. "Trust it," Bran said simply. "Stop trying to make it perfect." Sansa frowned. She'd learned there was safety and control in perfect courtesy, in knowing exactly what to say and how to act. "Here," Arya said suddenly, standing. "Let's try something different. Stand up." Sansa rose smoothly, brushing leaves from her skirts. "What now?" "Turn around and fall backward." "I beg your pardon?" Sansa's eyes widened. "Turn around and fall backward," Arya repeated with exaggerated patience. "And catch yourself with the Force." "That's absurd. I'll hurt myself." "Not if you trust the Force," Bran said. "I've done it." Arya too. Sansa looked between her siblings, certain they were playing some trick. "This is ridiculous." "You can't always plan everything," Arya insisted. "Sometimes you have to just react." "Master Luke says the Force is strongest when we stop thinking and just feel," Bran added. With great reluctance, Sansa turned around. She stood rigid, unable to convince herself to fall. The ground seemed suddenly very hard, the distance to it somehow greater than before. "We're wasting daylight," Arya sighed. "If you're too frightened." "I'm not frightened," Sansa snapped, though her racing heart suggested otherwise. She closed her eyes, trying to steady her breathing as Master Luke had taught them. She could sense Arya and Bran behind her, feel the ancient presence of the heart tree, even the small creatures moving through the underbrush nearby. "Let go," Bran whispered. Sansa tilted backward slightly, then caught herself. This was foolishness. She couldn't possibly. A sharp memory surfaced. The assassin's blade against her throat, the paralyzing terror, and then something inside her reaching out, pushing, in the instant before Master Luke arrived. She hadn't had time to think then. Sansa exhaled and let herself fall. For a terrible moment, there was nothing but air and the sensation of falling. Her heart leapt into her throat. Then, almost without thought, she reached out with something beyond her hands. A sense, a feeling, and her descent slowed. She didn't stop completely, but when she finally touched the ground, it was with the gentleness of a feather landing on snow. She lay there, staring up at the red leaves of the heart tree, a startled laugh escaping her lips. "You did it," Bran clapped. "Not bad," Arya admitted, the ghost of a smile on her face as she extended a hand to help Sansa up. "You stopped planning and just reacted." It felt. Sansa searched for the words as she rose to her feet. "Felt like singing, almost, like something moved through me rather than me moving it." "That's the Force," Bran nodded. Sansa picked up the stone again. This time, instead of trying to command it, she simply felt its weight, its texture, and then imagined it as part of herself. The stone rose from her palm, hovering steadily at eye level. 1 minute, Arya counted, watching closely. "Keep going." When the stone finally descended, Sansa felt oddly lightheaded yet exhilarated. "I did it." "You did," Bran agreed, his expression thoughtful. "But as Master Luke says, practice makes perfect." The light was fading as they made their way back toward the castle, 2 Stark guards falling in behind them. Sansa recognized Tomard by his girth, but the other was newer, one of several men Mother had hired since Father left for King's Landing. "Have you noticed the new guards?" Bran asked quietly, his voice barely audible. Sansa glanced sideways at her brother. "What about them?" "Something's off," Bran murmured. "The way they watch us, especially the odd-looking one." Sansa thought of the guard he mentioned, pale eyes that makes her skin crawl. Just yesterday, she'd found him outside her chamber door when he had no reason to be in that part of the castle. "I've felt it too," she admitted. "When he looks at me, it's like when you step on ice and hear it crack beneath you." "What are you two whispering about?" Arya asked, dropping back to walk beside them. "The new guards," Bran replied. "The one with the broad nose." Arya's face hardened in a way that reminded Sansa startlingly of their father. "I've seen him watching Sansa, following her sometimes." "Mother hired them," Sansa said uncertainly. "Doesn't mean they're loyal," Arya retorted. "Not everyone who bows and says, 'My lady,' means it." The realization sent a chill through Sansa. Once, she would have dismissed such talk as Arya being difficult. Now, after Joffrey, after the assassin, she found herself unable to dismiss the unease that settled in her stomach whenever that guard was near. "What should we do?" she asked. "Tell Robb when he returns," Bran suggested. "Or Mother." Arya's hand drifted to Needle, sheathed at her hip despite Mother's disapproval. "If they try anything, if they even think of hurting you, I'll take care of them." There was something in her sister's voice that made Sansa look at her anew. Not the wild little girl who ruined her needlework and put frogs in her bed, but someone fiercer, more dangerous. Someone who, despite all their quarrels, would fight for her without hesitation. "We should hurry back," Sansa said, oddly moved. "It'll be dark soon." As they approached the Hunter's Gate, Sansa felt the broad-nosed guard's pale eyes follow her. This time, instead of looking away, she met his gaze directly, drawing on the same instinct that had helped her with the stone. Something cold and calculating lurked behind his respectful nod, a dissonance between appearance and truth that reminded her horribly of Joffrey. In that moment, she knew with absolute certainty. Arya was right. Not all enemies announced themselves with drawn swords. Some hid behind courtesies as false as their smiles, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The Sunset Sea. Jon danced across the weathered deck of the merchant cog, his wooden practice sword cutting precise arcs through the salt-laden dawn air. The coast of the Reach stretched beyond the starboard rail, a golden line beneath a sky streaked with purple and orange. He focused on his breath, on the controlled rhythm of his movements as he performed the basic Vapad forms Master Luke had taught him. Channel your anger, don't suppress it. Guide it like a river, not a wildfire. Sweat beaded on his brow despite the morning chill. Each strike carried the weight of his newfound heritage. Rhaegar Targaryen's son, not Eddard Stark's bastard. The bitter truth sliced deeper than any blade. Ghost lounged near the mast, red eyes half closed but ever watchful. Jon could feel him through their connection, a calm presence amidst Jon's inner storm. From the corner of his eye, Jon spotted Phalia flowers perched in the rigging. Her hair caught the breeze as she tracked his movements with the sharp eyes of someone accustomed to noting every detail of her surroundings. He'd seen that same watchfulness in the wildling woman Osha, a survivor's instinct. Jon finished the form with a flourish, bringing his practice sword to rest at his side. His breath came in controlled pants as he rolled his shoulders, working out the tension. "That's not fighting. Not like any I've seen," Phalia called, descending from her perch with practiced ease. She dropped the last few feet to the deck, landing with a soft thud. "What do you call those movements?" Jon wiped sweat from his brow with his sleeve. "Just something my teacher showed me." "From his eastern homeland?" She approached, her eyes narrowed with calculation. "The same eastern lands where men throw men without touching them and destroy harbors with a gesture?" Jon's mouth went dry. He'd hoped the chaos of their escape from Oakenshield would have left confusion rather than clarity. "I wanted to thank you," Phalia continued, her voice softening slightly, "for helping me escape that situation with the merchant Lannet. It was Master Luke who—" "It was all of you," she cut in. "But there's something you're not telling me. Something about what you can do." She gestured vaguely toward his practice sword. "No man moves like that. And your white wolf." She glanced at Ghost, who had risen to his feet, padding silently toward Jon. "He's no ordinary beast." Jon shifted uncomfortably, sweat cooling on his skin in the salt-tinged breeze. The deck beneath his boots creaked with the ship's gentle roll. "You know, in the north we have a saying, when the wolves come out to play, best not ask what game they're hunting." His voice carried forced lightness, but his hand instinctively found Ghost's thick fur. "Though I suppose that loses something when there's an actual wolf present." "Yes, I think a giant wolf helps with that," Phalia replied flatly. But destroying a harbor with a wave of a hand? She stepped closer. What kind of sorcery is that? Red priests? Warlocks from Karth? Ghost pressed against Jon's leg, sensing his agitation. Some questions are dangerous to ask, Lady Phalia. Jon nearly jumped. Master Luke had appeared behind them, silent as a shadow, almost trying to demonstrate the variabilities in question. His voice was gentle but firm, the tone he used when teaching difficult lessons. Phalia whirled to face him, but to her credit, showed no fear. Then teach me to be dangerous too. Jon blinked in surprise. This was not the response he'd expected. Phalia moved closer to Luke, her fingers brushing his arm. A woman needs protection in this world. And you're different from other men. Her voice carried a sweetness that hadn't been there before. Jon watched Luke's expression cycle through several emotions as Phalia's fingers lingered on his arm. Understanding flickered first, then a brief sadness settled in the creases around his eyes, before resolving into gentle amusement. Phalia, Luke said softly, stepping back just enough to break the contact without seeming harsh. You're performing for the wrong audience. She blinked, confusion crossing her features. Her confident smile faltered. I don't understand. I've known many people across many. Luke paused, searching for the right word. Places. I recognize when someone's heart pulls toward their own kind. Jon's brow furrowed, not immediately grasping Luke's meaning. Then understanding struck him like a blow to the chest. The Septa at Winterfell had spoken of such women in hushed, condemning tones. The blood drained from Phalia's face. I don't know what you mean, she said, but her voice had lost its sweetness, replaced by something brittle and fearful. Jon watched calculation give way to naked terror in her eyes. She backed away, her right hand drifting to the small knife at her belt. How could you possibly? She whispered, glancing around the deck as if afraid someone might be listening. Who told you? No one told me, Luke said, keeping his distance and his voice low. But the Force, it shows truth sometimes. The tension in Phalia's shoulders didn't ease. Her knuckles whitened around the knife's hilt. Your secret is safe, Luke continued. Love is love, in all its forms. Jon drew a sharp breath. In the North, such things were spoken of rarely, and when they were, it was with disgust. The faith condemned such unions as abominations, worse even than bastardry. Tears welled in Phalia's eyes, relief and terror mingling. If Lord Hewitt had known. She didn't finish the thought. Jon's mind reeled. The teachings of the Septons warred with what he knew of the world's cruelties. He thought of how people spat bastard when he passed, how even Lady Stark had looked at him as if he were something foul. He thought of the burden of his true parentage, the secret that could see him killed if it ever reached Robert Baratheon's ears. Through the Force, he sensed Phalia's fear, genuine and primal. Not so different from what he'd felt when Lord Stark had told him of his Targaryen blood. You have nothing to fear from us, Jon said, stepping forward. He kept his voice steady despite the conflict within him. Ghost padded to his side, red eyes fixed on Phalia. I know what it's like to be different, he continued. To have secrets that could destroy you. Phalia's grip on her knife loosened slightly, but wariness remained in her stance. If anyone discovers the faith my family, House Stark needs people who understand discretion, Jon said, surprising himself with the offer. In Winterfell, there are positions away from Southern prejudices. The North remembers loyalty over all else, he added, echoing words his father, no, his uncle, had often said. The Force brought us together for a reason, Luke added, his calm voice adding weight to Jon's offer. Your skills, your secrets, both have value where we're going. Phalia wiped her eyes with her sleeve. And what exactly would I do in the frozen North, Snow? Lie freely, Jon answered simply. She considered this, her breathing steadying. I know the Reach. I can help you navigate Oldtown without drawing attention. Luke nodded, shifting focus. We have more immediate concerns. After what happened at Oakenshield, Lord Hewitt may have sent ravens ahead to Oldtown. There could be a warrant for our arrest. And your wolves are rather distinctive, Phalia added, practical matters seemingly calming her. Ghost especially. Jon glanced at Ghost, feeling a pang. You're right. Ghost and Amidala would draw too much attention. We need a cover story, Luke said. And quickly. Jon thought for a moment. I could pose as a minor northern lord seeking maester training. And I your personal guard, Luke agreed. I can be your maid, Thalia offered, her quick thinking showing through her fear. To keep your household tidy. Harwin mentioned he'd found plain sails in the hold, without the Stark direwolf, Jon said. We can change them before we reach Old Town. As the day waned, they finalized their preparations. The hardest part came when Jon knelt before Ghost, burying his fingers in the direwolf's thick white fur. You can't come with us to Old Town, boy, he whispered. Ghost's red eyes regarded him with what seemed like understanding. But the wolf pressed against Jon's chest, reluctant. Amidala watched Luke with a knowing look, as if she understood the necessity better than Ghost did. Luke had explained that she would stay with his ship, guarding it until their return. We'll meet again at the Hightower Lighthouse, Jon promised Ghost, when our business at the Citadel is done. Thalia approached with a knife, having cut her hair even shorter. With her boyish appearance and changed clothes, she looked nothing like Lord Hewitt's bastard daughter. Well then, she said, her voice steadier now. Shall we become someone else? Jon nodded, feeling the weight of another identity settling on his shoulders. He was getting uncomfortably good at being someone other than himself. To Old Town, he said, and whatever waits for us there. Chapter 27, The Hunters and the Hunted. Year 299 AC/8 ABY. Bravos, Essos. The mutton had gone cold on the wooden trencher, its grease congealing into white streaks that reminded Daenerys of the shivering sea she'd crossed to reach Bravos. She pushed a piece of turnip through the mess with her knife. Her stomach too nodded to eat despite not having broken her fast that morning. You should eat, my lady. Doria's voice carried that gentle reproach she'd perfected during their weeks of flight. The Lyseni girl sat across from her, tearing bread into small pieces with delicate fingers. Starving yourself won't stretch our coin any further. Daenerys touched the shorn ends of her silver-gold hair, still unaccustomed to how it barely brushed her shoulders now. Doria had cut it with a fish knife their second night in Bravos, sawing through the distinctive Targaryen locks while Daenerys bit her lip to keep from crying. Not from pain, but from the loss of one more piece of herself. 3 dragons left, Daenerys said, meaning the coins, not the eggs hidden beneath loose floorboards under their bed. That's all we have. 3 gold dragons to last until... She trailed off, unable to finish the thought. Until what? Until they starved? Until someone recognized her despite the shorn hair and cheap wool dress? Ser Jorah earns 2 silvers a week guarding Master Keogh's warehouses. Doria reached across to squeeze Daenerys's hand. We'll manage. He's a knight, not a common cell's word. The words came out sharper than Daenerys intended. We fled Pentos with nothing but stolen eggs and the clothes on our backs. Now I have him working like a dock laborer while we hide in this. She gestured at the water-stained walls, the narrow window that looked out on a canal thick with refuse. He serves you willingly. Doria stood, gathering their trenchers. As do I. The reminder stung. Doria had given up her comfortable position in Illyrio's manse, risked everything to help Daenerys escape. And how had Daenerys repaid her? By dragging her to this squalid inn where they shared a room barely large enough for 2 narrow beds. I know. Daenerys caught Doria's wrist as she passed. I'm grateful, truly. Without you and Ser Jorah. She thought of Khal Drogo's massive hands, of what her wedding night would have been. I owe you both my life. Doria's smile transformed her face, making her look even younger than her 16 years. You owe me nothing, my lady. I chose this path. She balanced the trenchers against her hip. I'll return these to the kitchen. Try to rest. You barely slept last night. After Doria left, Daenerys moved to the window. Below, a narrow boat pulled through the canal, its owner singing in the bastard Valyrian that Braavosi called their own tongue. She'd learned enough to understand basic phrases, but the rapid-fire dialect still eluded her. Another reminder that she was a stranger here, despite her Valyrian blood. The knock came soft, almost tentative. Daenerys turned from the window, assuming Doria had forgotten something. She crossed the room in 3 quick steps and pulled open the door. The woman standing in the hallway made Daenerys step back. She wore robes of deep red samite that seemed to shimmer in the dim light, but it was the mask that stole Daenerys's breath. Lacquered wood, painted in blacks and golds to form a woman's face more beautiful and terrible than any living features could be. The eyes behind it glittered like stars. Daenerys Stormborn. The woman's voice emerged from behind the mask like smoke from a brazier. May I enter? Daenerys's fingers found the door's edge, ready to slam it shut. Who are you? What do you want? I am Kaith. The masked woman tilted her head, and the hallway's shadows seemed to bend around her. I mean you no harm, child of dragons. Quite the opposite. Every instinct screamed danger, but something else pulled at Daenerys. The same feeling that came when she touched the dragon eggs, that sense of standing at the edge of something vast and ancient. How do you know who I am? The blood of old Valyria calls to those who know how to listen. Kaith gestured to the room beyond. May I? The hallway has many ears, and what I would share is for you alone. Against her better judgment, Daenerys stepped aside. Kaith glided past her, bringing a scent of cinnamon and something else. Something that made Daenerys think of the red wastes beyond the Dothraki Sea. Kaith moved to the center of the small room, her robes pooling around her like spilled wine. You dream of ice and fire. Daenerys's breath caught. She closed the door, her back pressed against it. How could you know that? A sound emerged from behind the mask that might have been laughter. Dreams? Child, what you see are not dreams but echoes of what will be. Kaith's fingers traced patterns in the air, and the candlelight bent wrong, throwing shadows that moved independent of flame. The wolf with eyes like winter storms. You see him wreathed in ice that burns. The young lord who commands hearts as easily as breathing. And the golden-haired stranger who walks between stars. You're speaking nonsense. But Daenerys's voice came out thin. The room had grown cold despite the brazier's heat. Am I? Kaith rose from the bed, her robes rustling like dried leaves. Tell me you haven't felt him reaching for you across the narrow sea. Tell me you haven't heard the song that has no words, only fire. The floor seemed to tilt. Daenerys gripped the doorframe. How can you? The blood knows what the blood knows. Kaith moved closer, bringing that cinnamon scent mixed with something metallic. Your house conquered with fire and blood, but the wolves? They remember older magics. When ice meets fire, when the dragon takes the wolf. She paused, head tilting. But there is another, one who carries light from distant stars. He teaches them to touch power your ancestors never dreamed. Who? The word scraped past Daenerys's throat. Who teaches them? Names have power, sweet child. Some truths must be earned, not given. Kaith's mask caught the firelight, making the painted features seem almost alive. But know this, when you stand before the heart tree with snow in your hair and dragons once again roam the skies, you will understand why the stranger came to this world. Stop! Daenerys's voice cracked. She'd only told two about those visions, so how can she know? What do you want from me? Want? Kaith settled onto Doria's bed as if it were a throne. I want nothing, sweet child. I simply wish to see where your journey leads. Speak plainly. I've no patience for riddles. Then I shall give you truth, though you may find it harder to bear than riddles. Kaith's masked face turned toward the window. The wolf comes to the water dancer's domain. Stone and salt, ice and fire. Your path to the Sunset Lands is already woven into the pattern. The Sunset Lands? Daenerys moved closer despite herself. You mean Westeros? But how? We have no ship, no gold. The wolf seeks the coin masters. When Winter's Lord walks among the freed, the daughter of dragons must be ready. Kaith's head tilted. Your children sleep now, but they will wake in flame and blood. Daenerys's hands clenched. The eggs. You know about the eggs. Tell me how to wake them. Please. Fire and blood, as your house words promise. But first. Kaith stood in one fluid motion. First you must survive the betrayal. Betrayal? Daenerys's mind raced. You mean Ser Jorah? No. He's sworn to me. He helped me escape. Risked everything. Laughter spilled from behind the mask, bright and sharp as breaking glass. Oh, sweet summer child. The bear is many things, but he is not your betrayer. Tell me, why does it take so long to return dishes to a kitchen one floor below? The words snapped Daenerys from her confusion. She staggered, catching herself against the wall. No, Doria would never. The Lyseni bird has already sung her song to those who would cage the dragon. Kaith moved toward the door. Illyrio's gold speaks louder than friendship. The hunters gather below even now, waiting for her signal. You're lying. But even as Daenerys spoke, details clicked into place. How Doria always volunteered to go to the market alone. Her questions about the dragon eggs, where Daenerys kept them. The way she'd insisted they stay at this particular inn. Believe or disbelieve as you will. Kaith paused at the door. But if you value your freedom, You will take your children and flee through the kitchen's back door. Now, where would I go? I don't even know where Ser Yora. Daenerys turned to find the room empty. The door stood closed, as if Kaith had never been there at all. Only the lingering scent of cinnamon proved she hadn't dreamed the entire encounter. From below came the sound of boots on stairs. Multiple sets, moving with purpose. Daenerys didn't hesitate. She dropped to her knees, prying up the loose floorboard with her fingernails. The 3 eggs lay wrapped in what remained of her wedding silks, still warm to the touch. She stuffed them into a cloth sack, adding the 3 silver dragons and the small knife Yora had given her. The footsteps grew louder. Men's voices now, speaking in the guttural Pentoshi dialect. Daenerys slung the sack over her shoulder and slipped into the hallway. Instead of heading toward the main stairs, she turned left, toward the servants' stair that led to the kitchen. Her bare feet made no sound on the worn wood. The kitchen blazed with heat from 2 massive ovens. A cook looked up from his pot, but Daenerys didn't slow. She pushed through the back door into an alley that reeked of rotting fish and worse. Behind her, something crashed. The door to her room being kicked in, most likely. She ran, the sack bouncing against her back with each step. The eggs seemed to pulse with heat, as if sensing her fear. There! The back! The shout came from the inn. Daenerys ran harder, her shortened hair whipping around her face. She turned left at the first intersection, then right at the next, trying to remember the route to the Kyo warehouses. Yora had pointed them out once from their window, but the city looked different from street level. The sound of pursuit grew closer. She glanced back to see 3 men round the corner, all carrying naked steel. Girl! Stop! Daenerys ran faster, her lungs burning. The canal appeared ahead, one of the larger ones with a bridge. If she could cross it, lose them in the maze of streets beyond. She turned the corner at full speed and slammed into something solid. Not something, someone. A woman, but built like a mountain, with dark skin and arms thick as tree trunks. Daenerys bounced off her and would have fallen if hands hadn't caught her arms. A man, younger than Yora but with the same warrior's bearing. His face bore old scars, and his eyes were the gray-green of the narrow sea. Whoa there! He steadied her while looking at the woman while the giant woman rubbed her stomach where Daenerys had collided with her. I keep telling you to watch where you are going. Wasn't my fault, the woman grumbled. Girl came out of nowhere. Please. Daenerys gasped for breath. Please, there are men. They're after me. The man's expression shifted from amusement to alertness in an instant. His hand moved to his sword as 3 bounty hunters rounded the corner, pulling up short when they saw the group. Stand aside, the lead hunter said in accented common tongue. The girl comes with us. The man glanced at his companion, something passing between them that needed no words. He turned back to the hunters with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Now that's interesting. See, where I come from, we don't hand over frightened girls to men with drawn steel. This is not your concern, Westerosi. The hunter took a step forward. Give us the girl and walk away. No one needs to die. The giant woman laughed, a sound like boulders tumbling down a mountain. Oh, I like this one. He thinks he's frightening. She pulled a curved sword from her back, the blade gleaming despite the overcast sky. Should we tell him how wrong he is? Seems only polite, the man agreed. The woman moved faster than someone her size had any right to. Her blade took the nearest hunter across the throat before he could raise his guard. Blood sprayed across the alley's walls. The scarred man flowed forward like water, his sword meeting the second hunter's desperate parry. But where the hunter fought with brute force, the Westerosi fought with skill. His blade slipped past the hunter's guard and into his heart. The third hunter, the one who'd spoken, looked at his dead companions and made the only sensible choice. He ran. The woman cleaned her blade on one of the corpse's tunics. Amateurs. The man sheathed his sword and turned to Daenerys. I'm Asher Forrester, and this charming lady is Beska. You were heading somewhere before you ran into us? The Kyo Estates. Daenerys's voice shook. I have a friend there. Lucky for you, we've got business with a spice merchant near there. Beska examined the bodies with professional interest. Might want to move before the Braavosi guard shows up. They get touchy about corpses in their streets. Thank you. Daenerys clutched the sack tighter, feeling the egg's warmth through the cloth. I don't know how to repay. Don't thank us yet, Asher said, already moving. Day's not over, and in my experience, trouble likes company. As they walked through Braavos's twisting streets, Daenerys thought of Kaith's words. The Wolf Lord. Could she have meant Lord Stark? But what would the Warden of the North want in Bravos? Ada by Rakata Prime, Unknown Regions. The Millennium Falcon groaned as it fought the atmosphere of Rakata Prime. The descent rattled Leia's teeth. She gripped the worn leather of the co-pilot's seat until her knuckles turned white. Her other hand drifted instinctively to the swell of her belly beneath her tunic. The world below offered a lie of peace. Through the viewport, the planet was an endless expanse of blue ocean dotted with green islands. It looked nothing like the charred and war-torn worlds they had visited in their hunt for Luke. "Remember," Han said. He adjusted the deflector shields with a flick of his wrist. "We are just a cargo crew making a delivery. There is nothing special about us." Chewie let out a low rumble from the pilot's chair. It sounded distinctly like a mockery of a laugh. Leia caught the Wookiee's eye. She rolled her own in return. "I remember, Han. You have mentioned it 10 times since we broke orbit." She shifted in her seat. The crash webbing dug into her shoulder. Comfort was a luxury she had not known in months. "We are humble merchants delivering medical supplies to a research station." Han's jaw tightened. "Just making sure. The last thing we need is an Imperial Remnant warlord getting curious about why Princess Leia Organa is poking around the unknown regions." The concern in his voice took the edge off her irritation. She reached over. Her fingers brushed the rough fabric of his sleeve. "I know. I will be careful. You are worried about Luke." It was not a question. Han Solo knew her too well. He knew the ghosts that haunted her sleep and the shadows that lingered behind her eyes. "It has been over a year." The words came out quieter than she intended. No word. No message. Nothing. She closed her eyes. She reached out with her feelings to find that invisible thread connecting her to her twin. It was frayed and stretched thin across the stars. "He is alive," she whispered. "I can feel him through the Force. He is distant, but he is alive." Han took her hand. His thumb rubbed gentle circles against her palm. "Knowing the kid, he is probably knee-deep in some adventure. He is likely saving a whole system single-handed and is too busy playing hero to check in." Despite the weight in her chest, she smiled. Trust Han to make light of her fears while still acknowledging the truth of them. She squeezed his hand and drew strength from his familiar calluses. "The probability of Master Luke surviving in the unknown regions for 13 months without supplies or communication is approximately 3PO, Han groaned. "If you finish that sentence, I am switching you off." 3.7%. C3PO finished. The droid seemed oblivious to the threat. "Oh dear. I do hope R2-D2 is functioning properly. That little astromech was never designed for extended isolation in hostile environments." Han's hand met his forehead with a sharp smack. "Leia, please, just until we land." She turned in her seat to fix the golden droid with a look that could have frozen the lava flows of Mustafar. 3PO, perhaps now would be a good time to run a full diagnostic on your language circuits. Silently. "Oh, yes, of course, Princess Leia. I shall begin immediately." The droid's photoreceptors dimmed as he turned his attention inward. The Falcon bucked violently as they hit a pocket of heat turbulence. Leia's stomach lurched. The morning sickness was supposed to have passed weeks ago, yet her body refused to accept the truce. Han noticed the sway immediately. His hand left the controls to steady her shoulder. "You okay?" "Fine." She swallowed hard and willed her stomach to settle. "Just the air." His expression said he did not believe her for a second. "You should have stayed on Coruscant. Mon Mothma would have understood. The Senate needs you." "Do not." She pulled her hand away. "We have had this argument. Without me you would not even know where to start looking. The Force is guiding us here for a reason. The Force is not growing our children." His voice dropped low. It was a rough sound, a mix of frustration and fear that only he could manage. "You are 5 months along, Leia. This is dangerous. Everything we do is dangerous. That did not stop us before. Before, you were not." He gestured vaguely at her midsection. He seemed unable to find the right words. "Pregnant? I had not noticed." She softened her tone. "Han, I need to find him. He is my brother. He is the uncle to these children. I cannot just sit in a tower on Coruscant wondering if he is dead." The landing platform appeared through the clouds. It was a square of gray duracrete carved into the tropical forest. Han guided the ship down with his usual skill. The Falcon settled with a heavy metallic thud. Through the viewport, Leia saw the research station. It was a cluster of prefab buildings that looked distinctly imperial in design. Only the New Republic flag flying from the communications tower suggested otherwise. All right. Han powered down the sublight engines. He spun his chair to face her fully. Here is how this goes. Chewie and I handle the delivery. We ask the questions. You and Goldenrod stay with the ship. Han, I can. No arguments. He held up a hand. We do not know who runs this place. It could be Republic or it could be Imperial holdouts. Could be something worse. Until we know, you stay here where it is safe. One of the babies shifted, pressed hard against her bladder. She grimaced. Another stellar aspect of pregnancy the medics had failed to warn her about. She wanted to argue. Every instinct screamed at her to take charge. She wanted to strap on her belt and lead from the front as she always had. But then the movement came again. It was a flutter like wings against her ribs. There were two distinct kicks this time. She remembered she was not making decisions for just herself anymore. Fine. The word tasted like defeat. But if you are not back in 2 hours, I am coming after you. Fair enough. He leaned over and kissed her forehead. His lips lingered for a moment. Lock up behind us. Keep the engines warm just in case. Keep the blaster close and your lightsaber closer. I know how to defend myself. The words came out sharper than she intended. Yeah, well. He turned back. She caught the tightness around his eyes and the way his jaw worked. Humor me. Keep them where you can reach them. Both of them. Chewie rumbled his agreement. The Wookiee checked his bowcaster and gave her a reassuring growl. He would keep Han safe. He always did. She watched them head down the boarding ramp. Han had his familiar swagger, but it was dampened by the hand that hovered too close to the blaster on his hip. The ramp sealed with a hiss. It left her alone with the silent droid and her churning thoughts. She reached out through the Force again. She searched for that distant spark that was Luke. It was still there. It was still alive. Yet it felt so far away it was like trying to touch starlight with a bare hand. Whatever world he had found and whatever trouble he had walked into, she could only hope he was managing better than they were. A strong kick struck her right side. Then a second kick hit her left. She rubbed the spots absently. Your uncle better have a good explanation for this when we find him, she whispered. Outside, the tropical sun beat down on the hull. Somewhere in that station answers waited. She just had to trust Han to find them. The cantina stank of stale ale and unwashed bodies. A familiar cocktail that reminded Han of a dozen backwater ports across the galaxy. He shouldered through the crowd, noting the exits first, old smuggler's habit that had saved his skin more times than he cared to count. Chewie's massive frame blocked the doorway behind him, keeping watch while Han worked. The place was packed. Weequay pirates hunched over sabacc cards. A pair of Rhodians argued in their clicking language near the bar, and something that might have been human nursed a bottle in the corner. Standard rough crowd for a place like this. Nobody gave him a second glance, which was exactly how he liked it. Han slid onto a bar stool, the worn synth leather creaking under his weight. The bartender, a grizzled human with more scars than teeth, was busy pretending to clean glasses while obviously eavesdropping on two pirates at the bar's far end. Corellian whiskey, Han said, sliding a credit chip across the sticky bar surface. The real stuff, not that synthetic garbage. The bartender grunted, still focused on his other customers. Han caught fragments of their conversation, something about Ravagers and salvage rights. His hand stilled halfway to his pocket. Still searching the whole damn sector. One of the pirates growled, his voice rough from too much drink or too much shouting. Over a year now. Boss says that X-Wing's worth more than a year's haul. The other pirate, younger with a fresh blaster burn across his jaw, snorted. X-Wing's probably scrapped by now. Nobody survives a Ravager pack. Boss don't care about the pilot. Wants the ship. Says it's got modifications worth a fortune to the right buyer. Han's chest tightened. Luke's X-Wing. Had to be. The kid had tinkered with that fighter until it was more custom job than factory standard. He forced his expression neutral, accepting the whiskey the bartender finally poured with steady hands. Interesting conversation, Han said casually, loud enough for the bartender to hear. He slid another credit chip across, this one worth considerably more. I'm in the salvage business myself. Might be interested in beating them to the prize. The bartender's eyes flicked between Han and the credits. Greed won as it usually did. Last confirmed sighting was 3 parsecs out near the Plathos Nebula. The bartender muttered, pocketing the credits with practiced speed. Ravagers lost the trail when it jumped to hyperspace, but the jump vector was damaged. Couldn't have gone far. How long ago? Year, maybe 13 months. But like they said, Ravagers are still looking. Must think it came down somewhere in this system. Han knocked back the whiskey in one burning gulp. 13 months. Luke had been missing 13 months. And these scum were hunting his ship like vultures after carrion. The glass hit the bar harder than he intended. Thanks for the drink. He stood, tossing another credit on the bar for appearances. The pirates were still arguing about salvage splits, oblivious to his interest. Good. The last thing he needed was competition or questions. As he turned to leave, movement caught his eye. A woman in the corner, the one he'd dismissed as just another spacer, was rising from her table. Tan cloak, hood up, moving with the kind of purposeful grace that meant trouble. But Han had bigger concerns than mysterious women. Luke was out there somewhere, and now he had a lead. He pushed through the crowd toward Chewie, his mind already calculating jump vectors and fuel requirements. The Plathos Nebula was a big area, but if Luke's hyperdrive was damaged, he'd have looked for the nearest habitable system. That narrowed it down to maybe a dozen possibilities. "We got something," he muttered to Chewie as they headed back toward the Falcon. The Wookiee rumbled a question, but Han shook his head. "Tell you on the ship. We need to move fast." Han's thoughts raced ahead to Leia. She'd want to leave immediately, pregnant or not. And he'd let her because when it came to family, to Luke, there was no stopping her. The kid better be alive, because if Han had to tell his wife her brother was dead, if he had to watch her grieve while carrying their child, he pushed the thought away. Luke was too stubborn to die. Had to be. Behind them, unnoticed, the woman in the tan cloak followed at a careful distance, her footsteps silent on the Duracrete landing platform. Chapter 28, Masks of Necessity. Year 299 AC/8 ABY. Whispering sound. Luke circled John on the ship's deck, their steel blades catching the morning sun that filtered through the salt spray. 2 hours until Old Town. 2 hours before they'd have to sheath their swords and put on a play. The thought pressed against Luke's mind as he watched John flow through the opening sequence of Vapad. His movements sharp but still too hesitant. "Your anger's locked in your shoulders," Luke said, shifting his own stance into Gemso's wide, grounded position. "Let it flow through your whole body, not just your arms." John adjusted immediately, his next strike carrying more fluidity. The boy learned fast and with passion, though maybe the passion was a distraction. Luke brought his blade down in a crushing overhead strike, the falling avalanche technique he'd adapted from ancient Jedi texts. John barely deflected it, steel ringing against steel with a sound that sent sailors scrambling away from their practice area. "Good. Now counter." John's riposte came swift and vicious, channeling his emotion into precise aggression. Luke parried, noting the improvement in John's footwork. The boy no longer telegraphed his intentions through his stance. "Better." Luke pressed forward with a series of heavy blows, each one designed to test John's defenses. "But you're still thinking too much. Vapad requires instinct." John's gray eyes darkened. Not the sickly yellow of corruption, but the focused intensity of someone learning to harness their inner storm. He launched into a whirling combination that would have overwhelmed most swordsmen. Luke deflected each strike, using minimal movement to redirect John's momentum. "Your left side drops when you commit to the spin," Luke corrected mid-parry, bringing his blade around to tap John's exposed ribs. Again, without hesitation, John repeated the sequence, this time keeping his guard tight. The correction was immediate, instinctive. Luke felt a surge of pride through the force. Most students required weeks to integrate such adjustments. John did it in heartbeats. Luke increased his pressure, hammering down with Gemso's brutal efficiency. He watched John's expression shift from determination to something closer to desperation. Then, surprising him, John's stance transformed. The aggressive lines of Vapad melted into Sarisu's defensive sphere, his blade weaving a near-impenetrable barrier. Interesting. Luke hadn't taught him to switch forms mid-combat yet. "You're adapting," Luke observed, testing John's defense with probing strikes. "Good. But don't abandon aggression entirely." He deliberately left an opening, dropping his shoulder just enough to expose his right flank. John's eyes caught it immediately. The defensive web collapsed as John surged forward with Vapad's characteristic ferocity, his blade singing toward the gap. Luke twisted away at the last second, bringing his sword around to lock with John's at the hilts. Excellent. Their faces were inches apart, both breathing hard. You saw the trap but took it anyway. Why? Because sometimes the trap's worth springing if you're fast enough, John replied, his voice steady despite the exertion. You taught me that. Luke disengaged, stepping back as the Old Town lighthouse emerged from the morning haze. The city's sprawl stretched along the honey wine, the citadel's towers piercing the sky like accusations. Time to end this. Your improvement's remarkable, Luke said, sheathing his blade. 3 months ago, you couldn't maintain Vapad for 30 seconds without losing control. Now you're switching between forms instinctively. John wiped sweat from his brow, his expression caught between pride and uncertainty. It still feels dangerous. Like I'm one mistake from becoming what you fear? Luke understood that feeling intimately. That awareness is what keeps you safe. The moment you stop questioning yourself is the moment you fall. The ship's bell rang twice. 1 hour to port. Luke watched John secure his sword, noting how the boy's hand lingered on the pommel. In Old Town, they'd have to rely on different weapons, words, wit, and the Force itself. Old Town, the Reach. The high tower rose from Old Town like a stone finger pointing at the heavens, its beacon fire a distant star even in daylight. Luke felt the structure through the Force before he saw it clearly. A deep, resonant hum that reminded him of ancient Jedi temples, though darker somehow. The sensation crawled along his spine as their ship navigated the crowded harbor. 7 hells? John breathed beside him, gripping the rail. It's even larger than the stories claim. Luke studied the massive tower, its base wider than anything he'd seen on Coruscant. The Force whispered around it, not quite light or dark but something older, primal, like the heart tree at Winterfell but concentrated, focused into stone and mortar. Beautiful piece of engineering, Luke said, though his attention remained on that strange Force signature. Must have taken generations to build. Jory Castle spat over the side. Aye, and generations of gold to maintain, I'd wager. Look at all those ships. The harbor teemed with vessels from across the known world. Luke counted dozens of merchant cogs bearing sigils he didn't recognize. The smell hit them as they docked. Fish, tar, human sweat, and something sweet that might have been rotting fruit. Harwin stays with the ship, Luke decided, turning to the guards. And the wolves. We were 6 who left Oakenshield. Best if only 5 are seen entering the city. Harwin nodded, though his hand went to his sword hilt. I'll keep them safe, Sir Luke. Ghost and Amidala won't like being penned up though. They'll manage. Luke touched Amidala's head through the Force, sending calm. The direwolf's eyes met his, intelligent and accepting. They found lodgings at the Quill and Tankard, a modest in 3 streets back from the Citadel. Not the worst establishment Luke had seen. The rushes on the floor were fresh, and the ale didn't smell like it would kill anyone. But inconspicuous enough. The innkeeper, a thin man with ink-stained fingers, barely looked up from his ledger as they paid for 3 rooms. We should head to the Citadel first, Luke said once they'd stowed their gear. John, you remember your role? John's jaw tightened. Torrin Karstark, second son of Lord Ricard. Father wants me to study at the Citadel without taking vows. Lord Stark wrote a letter of introduction. Good. The story needs to be simple. Complexity invites questions. What if they refuse? John asked, adjusting his cloak to hide the sword at his hip. The Citadel's notorious for turning away even highborn lords. They guard their knowledge like dragons guard gold. Luke's mouth curved slightly. There's always a way, John. The Force has many applications. You mean that mind trick you've mentioned? Among other things. Phalia emerged from her room, having traded her travel-stained clothes for a simple dress they'd purchased from a merchant on the docks. The dress did little to hide her beauty, but at least she could pass for a favored servant. I want to come, she said immediately. You should rest, Luke replied. Alan can stay by your side to keep guard. I've never been anywhere but Oakenshield. Her chin lifted, that stubborn streak Luke had sensed in her flaring bright. I won't cause trouble. I can listen, learn things. People talk around women they think are simple. Women aren't permitted inside the Citadel, John said, his northern accent thickening slightly. Their laws are strict about that. Phalia's face fell for a heartbeat before brightening. Then I'll explore the markets with Alan. I've never seen proper city shops. That's... John glanced at Luke. Actually sensible. The merchant quarter surrounds the Citadel. Plenty to see. Her eyes turned to Luke, wide and guileless in a way that reminded him uncomfortably of Leia when she wanted something from Han. The comparison twisted something in his chest. Luke exhaled through his nose, already reaching for his coin purse. Stay close to Alan. Don't wander off alone. He pressed several silver stags into her palm, enough for a meal and perhaps some small purchase. Anything can happen in city. I know how to listen. Phalia's fingers closed around the coins. Servants gossip about their masters everywhere. Might hear something useful about the maesters, which ones are sympathetic to outsiders. Just be careful, Luke said. The Force whispered no immediate danger, but cities had their own hazards. Alan shifted his weight, hand resting on his sword pommel. I'll keep her safe, Sir Luke. Good man. Luke nodded to the Sellsword, then turned toward the Citadel's looming entrance. The walk to the Citadel took them through winding streets that grew progressively cleaner and wider. Merchants hawked everything from Myrish lace to ET silk. A juggler performed for copper coins while a septon preached about the Seven's judgment. Luke noticed John's wonder. The boy had never seen such concentrated humanity. The Citadel itself dominated an entire district, its towers and domes sprawling like a city within the city. Luke felt John's awe spike through their Force bond as they approached the main entrance, a massive archway carved with symbols Luke recognized as astronomical markers. Inside, the entry hall soared for stories, filled with the musty smell of old parchment and beeswax. Novices in gray robes scurried past carrying armloads of scrolls. The walls were lined with shelves containing more books than Luke had seen since the Jedi archives. A young man sat behind a desk near the entrance, his chain collar marking him as some sort of acolyte or novice. He looked up as they approached, his expression shifting from boredom to disdain as he took in their northern look. State your business, he said, not bothering with courtesy. John stepped forward before Luke could respond. Good, he needed to establish himself in this role. I am Torrin Karstark, John said, his voice carrying just the right amount of northern pride without arrogance as due for a third son. My Lord Father has arranged for me to study your libraries. Lord Eddard Stark of Winterfell provided this letter of introduction. He produced the sealed parchment, which the novice took with obvious reluctance. Luke watched him read, sensing the prejudice rolling off him like heat from a forge. The boy, who he couldn't be more than 17, was enjoying his small authority. I cannot permit this, the novice said, handing the letter back without ceremony. The Citadel's knowledge is not for every lordling who wishes to play at scholarship. Luke started to move forward, already reaching for the Force, but John's hand shifted slightly, a gesture they'd practiced, meaning wait. Interesting. I see, John said calmly. And you have the authority to make such decisions? To turn away a lord's son with a letter from the Warden of the North. The novice's confidence wavered. Well, that is. Because if you do have such authority, I'll certainly inform Lord Stark that a novice. What was your name? Decided his word held no weight in Old Town. John's tone remained pleasant, conversational even. I'm sure he'll find that fascinating when he corresponds with the king. I didn't say. An Archmaester would need to review. Excellent. John turned and sat on a stone bench against the wall, crossing his arms. We'll wait while you fetch one. The novice stood frozen, mouth opening and closing like a landed fish. Luke couldn't suppress his grin. His apprentice had learned well. Sometimes the best way to use power was to make others use theirs. Perhaps I might help? A new voice drew their attention. A slender young acolyte had been watching from an alcove. Luke realized though he'd sensed the presence but dismissed it as non-threatening. The youth had the smooth, dark skin, with eyes that held unusual intelligence. And Luke immediately knew. This was no young man at all. The Force sang with the deception, though it was masterfully done. Everything from her stance to her voice had been carefully cultivated to project masculinity. Fascinating. I could speak with Archmaester Marwyn, the acolyte continued. He's more open-minded about such requests. John stood, clearly relieved. That would be most appreciated. Might I have your name? The acolyte seemed surprised by the courtesy. All ears. They call me Sphinx sometimes, though I've never understood why. Joe. John caught himself. Torrin Karstark. This is my father's man Herrick and Lorik. Alariz's eyes lingered on Luke for a moment, as if sensing something unusual. Then she nodded. Wait here. I'll return shortly. As she left, Luke settled into meditation, letting his consciousness expand through the citadel. So much knowledge here, layers upon layers of history and secrets. But underneath his exploration, a tremor ran through the force, distant but urgent. Something was happening in the north. The sensation felt like ice cracking, like darkness stirring. Robb was in danger or would be soon. He pulled back, opening his eyes to find Jon watching him with concern. "Is everything all right?" "A disturbance," Luke said quietly. "Far from here. But we have our own task to complete." Nearly an hour passed before all eras returned, looking pleased with himself. "Archmaester Marwyn will see you," she announced. "Tomorrow, unfortunately. He's in the middle of a delicate experiment with the glass candles. But he's instructed me to ensure you have access starting at first light." Jon stood and extended his hand. "Our thanks, all eras." She hesitated before taking it. Luke noticed Jon's slight surprise at something, probably the softness of her palm. They left the citadel as afternoon shadows grew long. Once they were well away from the entrance, Jon leaned close to Luke. "All eras is a woman," he whispered. "Yes. You knew. The Force reveals many things." Luke couldn't resist adding, "Was her hand soft?" Jon's ears reddened. Yes, actually. Softer than you'd expect from someone who studies to be a maester. Even with the slight calluses. Observant. You're learning to see beyond surfaces." "Why the deception, though?" "The Citadel doesn't accept women as acolytes. Sometimes we must wear masks to seek the knowledge we need." Luke thought of his own time disguised as a stormtrooper, infiltrating Jabba's palace. Judge her by her actions, not her necessary deceptions. Jon nodded slowly. "She helped us when she didn't need to. That speaks well of her." "Indeed it does." They walked in comfortable silence through Old Town's late afternoon bustle. But Luke's thoughts kept returning northward, to that tremor in the Force. Whatever darkness stirred beyond the wall was growing stronger. They needed to find what they came for quickly. Tomorrow, Marwyn would hopefully provide answers. Tonight, Luke would meditate and try to understand what the Force was warning him about. The convergence of ice and fire Jon would represent was approaching faster than anticipated. The high tower's beacon flared to life as sunset approached, and again Luke felt that ancient hum through the Force. There were secrets in this city beyond just books and scrolls. Old magic, old power. Bravos, Essos. The Kyo estate rose before them like a fortress of pale stone, its high walls crowned with iron spikes that caught the afternoon light. Daenerys shifted the weight of the satchel containing her dragon eggs, the leather strap cutting into her shoulder despite the padding. Her legs trembled. Whether from exhaustion or relief, she couldn't tell. "My thanks," she said, turning to face Asher and Beskha. The words felt inadequate, hollow as empty shells. "You saved my life. Both of you." Asher shrugged, his leather armor creaking with the movement. "Wasn't much trouble." "Wasn't much." Daenerys stared at him. "You killed 2 men." "Only 2, Beskha corrected, cleaning blood from beneath her fingernails with the tip of her dagger. "What a boring day." The casual way she said it sent a chill through Daenerys' spine. Yet these 2 had risked themselves for a stranger. She clutched the satchel tighter, feeling the warm pulse of the eggs through the leather. They seemed to hum against her ribs, as if sensing her turmoil. "I have nothing to give you," she began, then stopped. "The eggs. One of them could buy these 2 a ship, a house, a new life anywhere in the free cities." Her fingers found the clasp of the satchel, trembling as they worked the metal. "Actually, I don't need payment for doing what's right, Dany." Asher's use of the shortened name startled her. She'd given it without thinking when they'd asked, too frightened to remember she was supposed to be someone else. Anyone else. Some bounty hunters are scum. Not much better from slavers. They'd sell their own mothers for enough coin. Beskha's hand came down on Daenerys' back with enough force to drive the air from her lungs. "Sweet girl, like you shouldn't have to deal with those types." Her dark eyes glinted with something between amusement and concern. "We'll wait here until your friend comes. Make sure you're safe." Daenerys' hand fell away from the satchel's clasp. The eggs settled against her side, their warmth spreading through her ribs like wine through water. The estate's iron gate groaned open, and Yora emerged from the shadows beyond. His familiar bulk, the way he moved with his hand always near his sword as joy flooded through her chest. "Ser Yora." But Asher's reaction cut through her relief like cold water through silk. The rasp of his blade, leaving its sheath, rang across the courtyard. Beskha's weapon followed a heartbeat later, her stance shifting from relaxed to predatory as her gaze darted between the two men. "Well," Asher said, his voice carrying the kind of recognition that made Daenerys's stomach drop. "Didn't know your friend was a criminal, Dany." The word hung in the air like smoke from a pyre. Criminal. She knew what Asher meant. The slaves the poachers Yora had sold across the narrow sea. Her mouth opened, words of defense rising to her lips. He's changed. What he did was selling men into slavery? Asher's knuckles whitened around his sword hilt. There's no excuse for that. None. Yora had stopped 10 paces away, his own blade singing free of its sheath. The afternoon sun caught the steel, sending light dancing across the courtyard stones. Asher Forrester. His voice carried its own recognition, heavy and resigned. Small world. Meeting another northern exile in Braavos. Our exiles aren't the same. Asher took a step forward, and Daenerys noticed how his weight stayed balanced on the balls of his feet, ready to spring in any direction. I chose mine. For love. You sold men like cattle and still have the stones to call yourself a northerner. The word struck seemed to strike Yora like a blow. His shoulders sagged, but his sword remained steady. I don't want this to come to blows, Forrester. Then you shouldn't have become a slaver. Beska circled to Asher's left, her curved blade catching the light. The tension stretched taut as a bowstring, and Daenerys found herself moving before she'd made the conscious decision. She stepped between them, arms spread wide, the dragon eggs bouncing against her hip. Stop! Her voice cracked on the word. Please, move aside, princess, Yora said quietly. She'd never told him not to use the title, but hearing it now, in front of these strangers, made her skin crawl. Princess. Beska's eyebrows rose. Asher's jaw worked as he processed this information. Then something else flickered across his face. Calculation. Lord Stark's in Braavos. The color drained from Yora's face so quickly Daenerys feared he might faint. Ned Stark. I arrived a day ago on business with the Iron Bank. Asher's smile held no warmth. Imagine he'd be very interested to know where Yora Mormont's been hiding. Might even earn me that pardon I've been wanting. 7 hells? Beska breathed, the pieces clicking together in her mind. Dany, you're the Daenerys, the dragon girl who ran from her wedding. She could see the conflict playing across Asher's face. Duty warring with whatever sense of honor had made him save her in the first place. The calculation was simple. 2 valuable prizes stood before him. Yora Mormont, the exiled slaver. Daenerys Targaryen, the runaway Targaryen princess. She made her choice before doubt could creep in. I'll go with you. Princess, no. I'll go with you to meet Lord Stark, she continued, keeping her eyes locked on Asher's. But you let Ser Yora leave. Now, no pursuit, no word to anyone about where he is. Absolutely not. Yora stepped forward, and 3 blades rose in response. I won't let you walk into Stark's hands. He'll use you as a hostage, or worse, sell you back to Robert Baratheon. You don't let me do anything. The sharpness in her voice surprised even her. I make my own choices. Princess, this is madness. This is negotiation. She turned back to Asher, whose sword had lowered slightly. You're skilled fighters, both of you. So is Ser Yora. If you fight here, someone dies. Maybe all of you. But if I come willingly. Lord Stark's not known for mercy toward Targaryens, Asher said slowly. Do you understand what you are saying? Then I'll have to change his mind. Beska snorted. You? Change the mind of Ned Stark? Even I have heard his story. I have my ways. The eggs burned against her side, and for a moment she thought she heard them singing, a sound like wind through dragon bones. Will I be allowed to leave after meeting him? Asher's hesitation told her everything. I'll do what I can. Lord Stark's an honorable man, but my father burned his father alive. I have learned the history. She drew herself up to her full height, which wasn't much, but she'd learned from Viserys that presence mattered more than size. I accept your terms. Daenerys, please. Yora's voice broke on the plea. Think about what you're doing. Stark has every reason to hate you, to want you dead. And yet he's also known as the most honorable man in Westeros. She moved to Yora, placing her hand on his sword arm. The muscle beneath was rigid as stone. I need you to trust me. How can I trust this? You're walking into the wolf's den. Wolves. The word triggered something, a flash of memory from her dragon dreams. Snow and wolves and a boy with blue eyes. Yes, I suppose I am. She squeezed his arm once, then stepped back. Wait for me. I'll return. And if you don't? The question hung between them like a blade. She had no answer that wouldn't be a lie, so she offered none. Instead, she turned to Asher. When do we leave? Now would be best. Better to approach him tonight, while he's not surrounded by bankers. I'll set a meeting at an inn to keep it public. Beska sheathed her weapon with obvious reluctance. This is stupid, Ash. We should take them both. We gave our word, Asher replied, though he didn't sound entirely convinced of his own decision. Daenerys adjusted the satchel's strap, the eggs settling against her hip like old friends. 3 eggs. 3 dragons that would never be. Unless this gamble paid off in ways she couldn't yet imagine. Ser Jorah, she said without turning around. Don't follow us. Princess. That's a command. She heard his sharp intake of breath, the scrape of his sword returning to its sheath. When she glanced back, he stood like a man carved from granite, jaw clenched so tight she could see the muscles jumping beneath his skin. As you command, he said, the words like ground glass. Asher gestured toward the street. We should move. The Stark party is staying near the Iron Bank, in the Preston Manse. There is an inn nearby and it's a bit of a walk. As they left the courtyard, Daenerys felt Jorah's gaze burning into her back. She was walking into the hands of her family's greatest enemy, armed with nothing but 3 stone eggs and a desperate hope that the honor of Ned Stark was more than just stories. Behind them, she heard Jorah's voice, rough with emotion. If you harm her, Forrester, there's nowhere in this world you can hide from me. Asher didn't respond, but Beska laughed, a sound like knives being sharpened. Get in line, Mormont. Half the known world wants her. We're just the ones who found her first that can help. The streets of Braavos stretched before them, canals reflecting the afternoon light like veins of gold. Somewhere ahead, Ned Stark waited, unaware that the last Targaryen princess was walking straight into his hands. Fire and blood, she thought, the words of her house echoing in her mind. But today she would try words first. If those failed, well, she'd learned from Viserys that dragons, even unhatched ones, had their own kind of power. Chapter 29. From Quill to Sword. Year 299 AC/8 ABY. Braavos, Essos. The Iron Bank's chamber felt colder than the Braavosi morning warranted. Its gray stone walls unadorned save for iron braziers that cast more shadow than warmth. Eddard Stark sat across from 3 key holders, their faces as expressionless as the ledgers stacked between them. Beside him, Lord Wyman Manderly occupied considerably more of his chair, his bulk a reassuring presence that somehow made the austere room feel less hostile. Lord Stark, the center key holder, a gaunt man with parchment-pale skin, tapped a long finger against the polished table. Your request is substantial. The North prepares for winter, Eddard said simply. We require grain, preserved foods, and materials for defensive preparations. Defensive preparations. The key holder's tone remained neutral, but his companion, a woman with iron-gray hair pulled severely back, leaned forward. Against the crown's new taxes, perhaps? No. The word came out harder than Eddard intended. He felt Wyman shift beside him, the Lord's rings clicking softly against the table's edge. The North feeds itself. We seek investment for our people's survival, not charity to pay Southern demands. Indeed, Wyman added, his voice carrying the smooth confidence of a man who'd sat in this very room before. House Manderly has dealt with the Iron Bank for generations. We've never defaulted, never delayed. What Lord Stark proposes benefits all parties. The 3rd key holder, younger than the others with sharp Braavosi features, opened a ledger. The sum you request could fund a small war. How do you propose repayment? Eddard reached into his cloak and withdrew a rolled parchment, the wax seal of Winterfell still intact. As he broke it, he caught Wyman's slight nod of encouragement. The North offers something we've never sold as common commerce. Ironwood. The temperature in the room seemed to shift. The woman's eyes sharpened while the younger man's quill paused mid-stroke. Ironwood. The gaunt key holder's voice betrayed the first hint of interest. The North has guarded those groves since before the Undulls came. Circumstances change. Eddard spread the parchment flat, revealing detailed figures in Maester Luwin's precise hand. 10-year exclusive contracts. The Iron Bank would have first selection rights on 60 to 80 trees annually. The North will decide on the number depending on the year. A mere 80 trees? The woman's skepticism was palpable. Wyman chuckled, a warm sound that filled the cold space. My lady, a single ironwood beam can support a keep's great hall for hundreds of years. Ships built with ironwood planking have tested storms fearlessly. 80 trees, properly marketed to the free cities, would be worth. He paused, letting them complete the calculation themselves. Considerable? The younger key holder murmured, his quill moving rapidly across parchment. Lord Stark and I have discussed this extensively, Wyman continued, his fingers drumming a merchant's rhythm. White Harbor will manage the shipping logistics. My own ships, my own captains. The bank needn't concern itself with transportation. The gaunt man's eyes moved between them. And what surety do you offer? House Manderley personally guarantees this loan alongside House Stark. Wyman's voice carried the weight of gold dragons. My coffers stand as additional collateral. The vaults beneath the new castle hold enough to cover the first 3 years' payments should any difficulties arise. Eddard watched the key holders exchange glances, saw the shift in their posture. Wyman's backing had transformed negotiation into near certainty. His thoughts drifted, unbidden, to Luke Skywalker bent over maps in Winterfell's library, as he pointed to trade routes. Scarcity creates value, Luke had said, his accent still strange to Eddard's ears. You could flood the market with ironwood, but then it becomes common. Control the supply and you control the price. Eddard had been skeptical until he'd shared the concept with Wyman during the Harvest Festival. The Fat Lord's eyes had lit up like a child's on his name day. Brilliant, Wyman had exclaimed, wine sloshing dangerously in his cup. Ice houses at White Harbor alone could preserve our entire fishing fleet's catch. Do you realize what this means? Luke had explained further, those strange abilities of his making candle flames dance as he spoke. The ironwood harvesting would create sawdust, massive amounts of it. That sawdust, packed properly, could insulate ice houses. Ice houses could preserve food for months, even years longer than what they can do currently. The ironwood sails create sawdust. The sawdust preserves food. The preserved food feeds your people through the long night. Everything connects. Luke's eyes had held that distant look, as if seeing things beyond normal sight. Wyman had grasped it immediately. We could supply the Night's Watch for years with preserved food. Smoked fish, salted meat, pickled vegetables, all kept fresh far longer than traditional methods. Lord Stark, the woman's voice pulled him back to the present. You seem distant. Merely considering the benefits, Eddard replied. The loan funds would go toward new fishing vessels for our coastal villages, doubling our food production. Ice houses using the sawdust from ironwood harvesting. Infrastructure that extends our storage capabilities. A comprehensive plan. The gaunt key holder closed his ledger with a decisive snap. With Lord Manderley's guarantee, the risk becomes negligible. Then we have an agreement? Eddard kept his voice level, though relief flooded through him. We do. The younger key holder began drawing up documents. Exclusive ironwood contracts as collateral, Lord Manderley's backing as additional surety, guaranteed minimum prices to protect both parties. Wyman beamed, his multiple chins wobbling with satisfaction. Excellent. Simply excellent. As they signed and sealed the documents, Eddard thought of Luke's final words on the matter. The coming darkness won't be defeated by swords alone. Empty bellies and frozen bodies break faster than castle walls. The business concluded, they rose to leave. The gaunt key holder offered something that might have been a smile. The Iron Bank will be watching this venture with great interest, Lord Stark. Ironwood has been a dream of merchants for thousands of years. Outside the Iron Bank's imposing entrance, Wyman clapped Eddard on the shoulder with enough force to stagger a smaller man. That went even better than we hoped, my lord. Your strange advisor's ideas have merit. Before Eddard could respond, Hallis Mullen approached quickly, his boots splashing through a puddle. He leaned close, voice low. My lord Asher Forrester sends word. He wishes to meet with you. Says it's urgent. Wyman's eyebrows rose like twin caterpillars. The exiled Forrester boy? Here in Bravos. Eddard nodded slowly, mind already turning. Asher had been exiled for the Whitehill incident, but the boy had been defending his lover's honor. If he'd risked coming this close to Westeros, the matter must be serious indeed. Shall I accompany you, my lord? Wyman offered, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. Best I handle this matter personally. Hallis, Willem, and Harlan will be enough. Eddard adjusted his cloak against the Bravosi mist. Return to the manse. If I'm not back within 2 hours, send Andar Royce with more men. Wyman nodded, understanding flowing between them. Whatever Asher Forrester wanted, it likely touched on matters best kept from too many ears. As Eddard followed Hallis through Bravos's winding streets, he wondered what could have drawn the exiled Forrester back toward danger. The boy had always been wild but never too foolish. His hand drifted to Ice's pommel, finding comfort in the ancient steel's presence. The coming darkness Luke spoke of seemed to touch everything now, drawing the most unlikely players onto the board. First mysterious visitors from the sky, then the dead walking, and now exiled sons emerging from shadows. Eddard quickened his pace, eager to learn what new complication awaited him in this city of secrets and canals. The tavern door groaned on rusted hinges as Eddard pushed through, the warmth hitting him like a physical thing after the cold Bravosi evening. Smoke from cheap tallow candles mixed with the smell of fish stew and unwashed bodies. His eyes adjusted to the dim light, scanning the crowded common room. Sailors hunched over their cups, speaking in the various tongue of the docks. A Tyroshi with a forked green beard argued prices with a Lysini merchant whose perfume couldn't quite mask the stench of the place. There, at the back near the kitchens, Asher Forrester sat with his back to the wall, exactly where a Sellsword would position himself. The years in Essos had changed him. Broader shoulders, sun-darkened skin, a scar along his jaw that hadn't been there before. Beside him sat a woman built like a warrior, dark-skinned with the kind of stillness that spoke of readiness for violence. The third figure remained hooded, small and slight, hands wrapped around a steaming mug. Eddard moved through the crowd, Hallis and Willem flanking him while Harlan stayed by the door. The conversations around them didn't pause. This wasn't the sort of establishment where anyone paid attention to anyone else's business. Good. That was likely why Asher had chosen it. As they approached, Asher rose in a soldier's manner, his movements still carrying the training of his youth despite the Sellsword swagger he'd adopted. "My lord," he said, voice carrying genuine respect beneath the Associ accent he'd picked up. Eddard extended his hand. A Forrester was still a Northman, exile or no. Asher's grip was firm, calloused from sword work, but there was something like gratitude in the way he clasped Eddard's forearm in the old northern fashion. "Please, my lord, sit." Asher gestured to the bench across from him, waiting until Eddard was seated before resuming his own place. The courtesy hadn't been beaten out of him by his years across the narrow sea. Then, "How do you fare, Asher?" Eddard asked, studying the young man's face. "The life of a Sellsword suits you?" A bitter smile crossed Asher's features. "It keeps me fed, my lord. Fought for the company of the Rose for a time, then the Windblown. Good men, some of them. Most are just trying to survive another day." His voice carried both pride and regret. "I've seen Tyrosh, Lys, even the disputed lands. Beautiful places, if you don't mind the blood in the soil." "You were a fool," Eddard said quietly. "Not thinking before you punched Jerwef Whitehill." Asher's jaw tightened. He was disrespecting. "I know what he was doing." Eddard's voice remained level. "And I don't agree with your father's ruling. But Lord Forrester is my bannerman, and I cannot override his justice in his own lands. You understand that?" "I do, my lord." Asher's fingers drummed once against the scarred table, then stilled. "I've made my peace with it. Mostly." Eddard sighed, feeling every one of his years. "I wish I could allow you home, lad. I understand Lord Stark's position." Asher's voice turned serious, losing the casual tone. "But I didn't ask for this meeting for myself." Eddard's attention sharpened. "Then perhaps you should introduce your companions." The words seemed to pull Asher from whatever thoughts had claimed him. "Of course. My apologies." He gestured to the warrior woman. "This is Beska. Saved my life more times than I can count. Best blade in Essos, though she'd gut anyone who said it too loud." The woman snorted. "Only because you keep picking fights with entire Sellsword companies. And this," Asher continued, his voice taking on an odd quality, "is the reason I asked to meet you." The hooded figure reached up with pale, delicate hands and pushed back the hood. Eddard's breath caught. Silver gold hair spilled free, catching the candlelight like spun moonlight. Violet eyes met his, proud and wary in equal measure. The Valyrian features were unmistakable, high cheekbones, that particular cast to the jaw that marked the blood of old Valyria. But more than that, she had the look of her brother Rhaegar around the eyes, though thankfully none of Aerys' madness lurked there. Daenerys Targaryen, here, in Bravos. He looked between Asher and the girl, words failing him entirely. His mind raced through implications, possibilities, dangers, Robert would burn half the free cities to ash if he knew she was this close to Westeros. And Asher had brought her to me. Why? Asher's grin held an edge of satisfaction at Eddard's speechlessness. But the girl lifted her chin and spoke first. I am Daenerys Stormborn of House Targaryen. Her voice carried defiance despite the slight tremor beneath it. And you are Lord Eddard Stark, the usurper's friend. Hallis shifted behind Eddard, hand moving to his sword, but Eddard raised a finger slightly, stilling him. His lord's courtesies reasserted themselves despite his shock. It's a pleasure to meet you, Princess Daenerys. Her eyes widened slightly, the only indication of surprise at the title. She'd expected hostility, perhaps, or denial of her birthright. Not acknowledgement. Eddard cleared his throat, working moisture back into his suddenly dry mouth. Princess Daenerys, I confess your presence here is unexpected. May I ask how you came to be in Braavos and in Asher Forrester's company? She lifted her chin higher, violet eyes never leaving his gray ones. I fled my brother's attempt to sell me to a Dothraki horse lord. Ser Jorah Mormont helped me escape, and these 2-inch, she gestured to Asher and Beska, saved me from bounty hunters sent by Illyrio Moper. Ice flooded Eddard's veins at that name. Jorah Mormont is with you? The words came out sharp as winter wind. That slaver has no place walking free. He saved my life, Daenerys interrupted, those violet eyes flashing with sudden fire. Whatever his past crimes, he has been nothing but honorable in my service. I would ask you to consider pardoning him, Lord Stark. You would ask. Eddard kept his voice controlled, though anger stirred beneath it. The man sold men into slavery, northern men. Even if they were criminals, even if they were poachers, they were still men. Not cattle. She leaned forward, and for a moment Eddard saw not a frightened girl but something else. Something that had steel beneath the silk. And what of your friend, the usurper? How many children did he murder? Rhaenys was 3. Aegon hadn't seen his second name day. Yet you call him brother. Her voice trembled now, caught between fear and defiance. The tension thickened like morning fog off the canals. Asher shifted uncomfortably while Beska's hand drifted toward the curved blade at her hip. Even the nearby conversations seemed to quiet, though perhaps that was just Eddard's imagination. The accusation sat heavy in his chest, a stone he'd carried for years. Elia's screams still visited his dreams sometimes, though he'd only heard them described. The blood on the throne room floor, the small bodies wrapped in Lannister cloaks. It was Tywin and his men, but I don't excuse Robert as his sins are his own, he said finally, each word measured. And they weigh on me, but I am not here as Robert's friend nor Tywin's. I am here as Lord of Winterfell, and you sought this meeting. What is it you want, princess? The defiance wavered, cracking like ice in spring. I have nowhere to go. Essos will hunt me for Illyrio's gold. Westeros. She swallowed, and suddenly she looked very young. I dream of a great wall of ice, of dragons soaring above fields of snow, of 2 boys dueling. One with dark hair, one with auburn. There's a man who carries a blade of pure light, who moves things without touching them, whose very presence feels like standing near a heart fire in winter. I know they sound strange, and Eddard's stillness was absolute. She was describing the wall, describing Jon and Rob's training, describing Luke Skywalker. The dreams tell me I must go north, she continued, voice barely above a whisper now. But I am the Mad King's daughter. How can I trust that your honor extends to me, that you won't deliver me to your king for his justice? You dream of them and the wall? The words came out strangled. Something shifted in Eddard's understanding, pieces clicking together like Myrish puzzle boxes. These dreams? When did they begin? When I received these. She pulled back her cloak carefully, revealing a leather bag at her side. Dragon eggs, from Illyrio. Dead stone, he called them, but they sing to me in my sleep. They show me visions of ice and fire meeting, of a war that will determine the fate of all living things. Luke's words, the coming darkness, ice and death marching south. And now this girl, the blood of the dragon, dreaming of his sons and the wall. The gods had a sense of humor darker than a moonless night. Princess, I believe. Asher's entire body went rigid. My lord, we have company. Eddard's, fully alert now, stood with his hand found Ice's pommel. He counted 11 men rising from various tables, moving with the coordinated ease of professionals. They'd been there all along, scattered through the crowd, waiting. Forgive me, princess, A gruff voice called from the shadows near the stairs. Jorah Mormont stepped into the flickering light, his hand already on his sword. I know you commanded me to stay away, but old habits die hard. Daenerys's face flushed with anger. Jorah, I told you. To remain at the safe house, yes. The exiled knight's eyes never left the bounty hunters. But a knight who abandons his charge to follow orders blindly is no true knight at all. Eddard's jaw clenched. The slaver dared speak of knighthood? But there was no time for that argument now. Daenerys's face drained of color, then flushed with rage. So this was a trap. You have no honor, usurper's dog. These are not my men. Eddard stood slowly, drawing ice partially from its sheath. Ice whispered against leather, and the nearest Sellswords stepped back. They knew that look of Valyrian steel, knew what it meant. One of them, scarred and gap-toothed, grinned at Asher. Should have killed me when you had the chance, Forrester. Would have been cleaner. Beskha cursed in what sounded like 3 different languages. I told you we should have gone after him. But no, you wanted to send a message. What is this? Eddard demanded, though he suspected he knew. Bounty hunters, Asher explained quickly, hand on his sword. We saved the princess from them earlier. Let one go as a warning to the others. Seems they didn't take the warning, Beskha added, her blade already half-drawn. Eddard pulled ice free entirely, the Valyrian steel catching what little light the tavern offered. The blade was too long for indoor fighting, but that had never stopped him before. Leave now and keep the peace. The lead bounty hunter laughed, though his eyes never left ice. Give us the girl, Lord Stark, and we'll keep your peace. You can go back to your frozen wasteland, we get our gold, everyone's happy. No, the word hung in the air like ice itself, sharp and final. Eddard gripped the great sword with both hands, feeling the familiar weight, the perfect balance that only Valyrian steel could achieve. His voice carried the full weight of northern authority, the kind that had made Stark words law for 8,000 years. The girl is under my protection. Oh, the word escaped Daenerys's lips, soft as a breeze. Heat flooded her cheeks, shame burning hotter than dragonfire. Lord Stark stood defending her with ice drawn, shoulders squared against men who'd come for her head. These weren't his hunters. The realization struck her, washing away the rage and leaving only mortification in its wake. She pressed her palm against the rough wooden table, steadying herself. Lord Stark, forgive me. I spoke in haste. The great lord of the north actually grinned, a quick flash of teeth that transformed his solemn face. Save your apologies for after, princess. The lead bounty hunter's scarred face twisted. Your funeral, Stark. They moved as one. The tavern exploded. Tables flipped, sending tankards spinning through the air. A serving girl shrieked, diving behind the bar as steel rang against steel. Daenerys pressed back against the wall, her heart hammering against her ribs as Lord Stark brought ice around in a devastating arc. The massive blade moved like water in his hands, impossible grace for something that size. A bounty hunter tried to duck beneath it, but Lord Stark's sword caught him at the shoulder, shearing through leather and bone with obscene ease. Asher fought with savage efficiency beside him, his blade a blur. Beskha moved like a dancer, her curved sword opening throats with delicate precision. Jorah fought like a man possessed, protecting her with fierce determination, his blade singing through the air. Even Lord Stark's men fought well, though one took a blade to the thigh and went down cursing, grabbing a lantern on his way down. Oil splashed across the floor, and flames leaped up like hungry fingers, racing along the spilled alcohol from overturned cups. The heat pressed against her back, smoke already thickening the air. Move. You need to move. She started forward, but movement flickered in her peripheral vision. Despite Jorah's best efforts, a hunter with pockmarked skin had slipped past the melee. His blade swept toward her. She twisted, but not fast enough. Fire lanced across her upper arm as steel parted silk and skin. Blood welled immediately, hot and wet. There's a good girl, he leered, grabbing for her with his free hand. His fingers tangled in her hair, yanking hard enough to bring tears. Illyrio pays extra if you're breathing. She shoved him with both hands, fury giving her strength. He stumbled backward, and her bag dropped. The eggs spilled across the floor, rolling toward the spreading flames. Even through her terror, she felt them pulse, their shells seeming to glow in the firelight. The bounty hunter's eyes went wide with greed. Dragon eggs? Real ones. He forgot her entirely, lunging for the nearest. the black one that always felt warmest. Daenerys didn't think. She planted both hands against his back and pushed with every ounce of strength she possessed. He pitched forward into the flames, his scream high and terrible. The smell of burning hair and flesh filled her nostrils, making her stomach heave. Lord Stark appeared at her elbow, ice dripping red. Two bodies lay behind him, their blood mixing with the spreading fire. "We need to leave, now." His hand closed around hers, calloused and strong, pulling her toward the door. The cool night air hit her face, blessed relief from the smoke. But as her feet touched the cobblestones, a terrible realization crashed through her. "My eggs." She wrenched free from Lord Stark's grip. "No! Princess! Daenerys!" Lord Stark lunged for her, but she was already running. "Princess, come back!" Yora shouted. She plunged back through the doorway. The heat should have driven her back as she knew it should have. Flames licked up the walls, turning old wood to char. The smoke should have choked her, but it didn't. The fire kissed her skin like a lover's touch. Her dress blackened and fell away in burning scraps, but her flesh remained untouched. She walked through the inferno as if through a warm bath, the flames parting before her. Fire cannot kill a dragon. Her eggs lay in the heart of the blaze, glowing like coals pulled from a forge. She dropped to her knees beside them, ignoring the burning floorboards beneath her. The black egg pulsed against her palm, its shell cracking. Her blood from the sword cut dripped onto it, sizzling. Fire and blood. Kaith's words echoed in her mind, finally making sense. She pressed her bleeding hand to each egg in turn, feeling their shells fracture beneath her touch. Life stirred within. The ceiling groaned above her, beams cracking. She gathered the eggs against her bare chest, their heat matching her own. A massive timber crashed down beside her, sending sparks spiraling upward. 3 heads emerged simultaneously. The black one first, scarlet eyes blinking in the firelight. Then the green, bronze tinged in the flames. Finally, the cream and gold, its scales like molten sunlight. Her dragons, her children, they chirped soft, almost musical sounds that she felt in her bones. The black one nuzzled against her breast, its tiny tongue lapping at a drop of her blood. The others pressed close, their bodies no larger than cats but radiating heat that had nothing to do with the fire around them. Another beam crashed down, jolting her from her wonder. She stood, cradling them against her chest, and walked toward the door. The flames bent away from her passage, as if acknowledging their queen. She emerged into the night naked but for ash and soot. 3 impossible creatures clutched to her breast. The crowd that had gathered gasped. Some fell to their knees, others backed away in terror. She barely noticed them, her attention fixed on Lord Stark, who stared not at her nakedness but at the dragons in her arms. His gray eyes held no fear, only a kind of grim understanding. Beside him, Yora had fallen to one knee, his face a mixture of awe and devotion. "Princess," he breathed. Lord Stark recovered first, yanking his cloak from his shoulders in one fluid motion. The heavy wool enveloped her and the dragons both, his hands careful not to touch her skin as he wrapped it around her. "We leave Braavos. Now." His voice brooked no argument. She nodded, still feeling disconnected from her body, from reality itself. The dragons made soft chirping sounds against her skin, their claws pricking gently as they settled. The black one, already she thought of him as the oldest, wrapped his tail around her wrist like a living bracelet. Bells began ringing in the distance. Fire bells first, then the deeper tones of guard bells. The Sea Lord's men would come soon, asking questions that had no safe answers. "Can you ride?" Lord Stark's voice cut through her daze. "Yes." The word came out stronger than she expected, her voice carrying an authority she'd never possessed before. She was no longer just Daenerys, the frightened girl sold by her brother. She was the mother of dragons. They moved through Braavos' twisting streets at a pace just short of running. Lord Stark led, his men forming a protective square around her. Asher and Beska brought up the rear, watching for pursuit. Yora stayed close to her side, his presence both protective and questioning, awaiting Lord Stark's judgment. The dragons stayed silent against her chest, as if understanding the need for secrecy. They passed through the drowned town, where the poorest Braavosi lived in houses that flooded at high tide. No one looked twice at a group moving quickly through the night. Such sights were common enough here. The smell of low tide and rotting fish masked the smoke that still clung to them. "My lord," Hallis gasped, favoring his left side where blood seeped through his jerkin. The Sea Lord will have questions I cannot answer. Lord Stark's voice was granite. We board the ship. We sail tonight. The Iron Bank, Willem started, has their contracts. The rest can be handled by Raven. Send a message to Lord Wyman to head to the harbor immediately. They reached the harbor as the moon broke through the clouds. Lord Stark's ship sat at anchor, its northern lines distinctive among the Braavosi vessels. Sailors scrambled to prepare for departure as they approached. As they neared the gangplank, Lord Stark turned to Yora, his gray eyes hard as winter ice. You may board, Mormont, but we will speak of your fate once we're at sea. Your actions tonight have earned you that much, nothing more. Yora bowed his head. I understand, my lord, and I thank you for your mercy. It's not mercy yet, Lord Stark said coldly. Merely a delay of judgment. Lord Wyman Manderly stood at the gangplank like a mountain of flesh draped in sea-green wool, his small eyes taking in their bloodied, smoke-stained group with the rapid calculation of a man who'd survived decades of northern politics. His gaze locked onto the shapes beneath Daenerys's cloak, the subtle movement, the unnatural warmth radiating in the cold harbor air. 7 fucking hells, he breathed, his jowls trembling. Then, louder, voice cracking like a whip across the deck. Cast off those lines. Now. Every man to his station. Sailors who'd been half asleep scrambled like startled gulls. Manderly's bulk moved with surprising speed up the gangplank, wood groaning beneath him. Lord Stark, he wheezed, grabbing Ned's arm with fingers like sausages. Tell me those aren't what I think. His words died as one of the dragons shifted, a wing edge briefly visible through torn fabric. The color drained from his florid face. Mother's mercy, you brought her here. You actually brought the Targaryen girl. His eyes widened further as he spotted Yora. And Mormont, the slaver. Get us moving, Wyman. Ned's voice carried the kind of iron that brooked no argument. I'll explain when we're clear of the harbor. Raise anchor, you lazy shits. Unfurl those sails. Move like the stranger himself is on our heels. The ship lurched into motion, ropes singing, canvas snapping taut in the night wind. Manderly's eyes never left Daenerys, a mixture of awe and calculation flickering across his features. She could feel her children's heartbeats, rapid as hummingbird wings, hot as forge fire. Princess. Lord Stark stood beside her at the rail as the ship pulled away from the dock. Those creatures. Do you understand what you've done? She looked down at the 3 small heads poking from his cloak. The cream and gold one yawned, showing rows of needle-sharp teeth. I've brought dragons back into the world. His voice was heavy. And Robert will burn the 7 kingdoms to ash when he learns of it. Fear should have gripped her then, but it didn't. She felt the dragon's warmth against her skin, their complete trust in her, their mother. Then perhaps it's fortunate I'm under your protection, Lord Stark. Below deck, he said finally. All of you, before someone with a spyglass gets curious. He fixed Yora with a hard stare. You as well, Mormont. We have much to discuss. Chapter 30. The Blind Dragon and the Hidden Prince. Year 299 AC/8 ABY. Castle Black, the Wall. Robb parried Gren's overhead strike, the clash of blunted steel ringing across Castle Black's practice yard. Snow crunched beneath his boots as he pivoted, using the force to sense Gren's next move before the bigger man even committed to it. The morning air bit at his exposed skin, cold enough to make his breath fog, but sweat still ran down his spine beneath his leathers. Keep your guard up, Robb said, deflecting another wild swing. You telegraph every strike. Gren grunted, adjusting his grip on the blunted sword. Behind him, PYP bounced on his toes, waiting his turn, while Halder leaned against the armory wall, nursing a bruised shoulder from his earlier bout. The yard stank of wet wool and smoke from the kitchens, where the morning's porridge bubbled over dying fires. Robb let Gren advance, reading the determination in the farm boy's stance. 3 more exchanges, steel singing its harsh song, before Robb slipped inside Gren's guard and swept his legs. The bigger recruit hit the packed snow with a thud that sent up a white cloud. Better, Robb offered his hand, pulling Gren to his feet. You lasted twice as long as yesterday. Still landed on my arse, Gren muttered, but there was no real complaint in it. PYP stepped forward, twirling his practice blade with more enthusiasm than skill. My turn to get humiliated by the young wolf. The nickname still sat strange on Robb's shoulders. He'd heard the Black brothers whispering it after he'd beaten 3 of their instructors in succession 2 days past. Not mockery, but something approaching respect. PYP came at him fast, all nervous energy and quick feet. The former mummer's son had speed but no foundation. Rob let him attack, studying his patterns. Through the force, he felt PYP's anxiety like a buzzing hive. The boy's desperate need to prove himself radiating outward. "Stop dancing," Rob said, batting aside a thrust. "This isn't a stage." "Easy for you to say." PYP's next strike came too wide. "You weren't born to juggle for coppers." Rob caught PYP's blade with his own, twisted, and sent it spinning into the snow. Before PYP could react, Rob had his practice sword at the smaller boy's throat. "Dead," Rob said simply. "Fuck me." PYP's shoulders sagged. "Didn't even see that coming. You're too focused on looking impressive." Rob lowered his blade. "Fighting's not about beauty." A harsh laugh cut across the yard. Rast pushed himself off the wall where he'd been watching, his scarred face twisted in a sneer. "Listen to the Lord Ling, teaching us poor crows how to fight." The force prickled against Rob's consciousness, a greasy sensation that made his skin crawl. Something fundamentally wrong emanated from Rast, like meat left too long in the sun. "Care to try?" Rob kept his voice neutral, though his grip tightened on the blunted sword. Rast spat in the snow. "Why not? Someone needs to knock that highborn smirk off your face." They circled each other, Rast's movements predatory where the others had been earnest. The older recruit had killed before coming to the wall, rape and murder in Maidenpool if the whispers were true. It showed in how he held his blade, not like a tool but an extension of his cruelty. Rast attacked without warning, going for Rob's knee. A crippling blow if it landed. Rob stepped back, letting the force guide him, feeling Rast's intentions like oil sliding across water. The man wanted to hurt him, genuinely hurt him, consequences be damned. Their blades met with enough force to jar Rob's teeth. Rast was stronger than expected, but strength meant nothing against the force. Rob felt the next strike coming before Rast's shoulders even shifted, was already moving to counter before the blade descended. 3 exchanges. 4. Rast's frustration mounted with each failed attack, his strikes becoming wilder, more vicious. On the 5th, Rob saw his opening. He flowed around Rast's guard like water, brought his pommel down hard on the man's wrist. Bone cracked. Rast's sword fell as he clutched his arm, cursing. "Yield?" Rob asked. Rast's response was to lunge at him barehanded, murder in his eyes. Rob sidestepped, grabbed Rast's broken wrist, and twisted. The man screamed, dropping to his knees in the snow. "I said yield. Fuck you, wolf boy." Rob released him, stepping back. Rast scrambled for his fallen sword with his good hand, but PYP's boot came down on the blade. "He beat you fair," PYP said. "Leave it." Rast surged up, backhanding PYP across the face. The smaller boy stumbled, blood spraying from his nose. "Mind your place, gutter rat." The force screamed a warning. Rob moved without thinking. Catching Rast's follow-up punch meant for PYP's throat. He squeezed until he felt bones grind together. "Touch him again," Rob said quietly, "and I'll break more than your wrist." "You threatening a brother of the Night's Watch?" Another voice, gravelly and mean. Dirk stepped from the shadows of the armory, hand on his dagger. The force recoiled from him too, that same wrongness magnified. "That's not very lordly. Neither is beating on someone half your size." Rob released Rast's hand, turning to face Dirk. "Unless you'd prefer to try me instead?" Dirk's smile was all yellowed teeth and malice. "Been wanting to see what you're made of, Stark." He came fast for such a wiry man, practice sword whistling through the air. But where Rast had been brutal, Dirk was cunning. Feints within feints, each strike designed to mislead. If Rob hadn't had the force, hadn't been able to feel the truth beneath the deception, Dirk might have had him. As it was, Rob let him think he was winning for exactly 4 moves. Then, when Dirk overextended on what he thought would be the killing blow, Rob grabbed his sword arm, pulled him off balance, and drove his knee into Dirk's solar plexus. The man folded, gasping like a landed fish. "Anyone else?" Rob looked around the yard. The other Black brothers suddenly found the walls very interesting. Blood ran steadily from PYP's nose, dripping onto his blacks. Gren pressed a handful of snow against the wound, but it wasn't stopping. "That's deep," Halder said, peering at the gash across PYP's cheek where Rast's ring had caught him. "Might need stitching." I'll take him to Maester Aemon, Gren said. Aemon Targaryen. Jon's great-great-uncle, though does he know? A living piece of his brother's hidden heritage. Sworn to the Night's Watch before Jon's grandfather was even born. I'll come with you, Robb heard himself say. Gren looked surprised but nodded. They left Rast and Dirk groaning in the snow, PYP stumbling between them, leaving red drops like a trail of garnets. The Maester's chambers sat high in the tower, requiring them to climb a narrow spiral stair that reeked of old stone and bird droppings. Mormont's ravens roost here, their black eyes following the group's ascent. One cawed as they passed, the sound echoing off the walls. Maester Aemon's door stood slightly ajar, warm air and the scent of herbs drifting out. Gren knocked. Enter. The voice was thin as parchment, but there was strength beneath it. They found the ancient Maester bent over a tome, his fingers tracing the raised letters. He didn't look up as they entered, but his head tilted, listening. PYP's been hurt, Gren announced. Rast hit him. Bring him to the light. The room was cramped but warm, a luxury at the wall. Shelves lined every wall, stuffed with books, vials, and things Robb couldn't identify. A fire crackled in the small hearth, and a kettle steamed on a hook above it. Aemon's fingers were gentle as they explored PYP's face, finding the wound with practiced ease. Not too deep, but it will scar without proper care. Gren, the blue bottle on the third shelf. Yes, that one. As the old Maester worked, cleaning and stitching with movements so precise they seemed to defy his blindness, Robb reached out with the force. He wanted to understand this man who shared Jon's blood, to sense what lay beneath the frail exterior. The moment Robb's consciousness brushed against Aemon's, the Maester's hands stilled. Interesting, Aemon said, not looking up from his work. Young Lord Stark, you have something to say. Speak your mind. Robb's mouth went dry. How had he known? Forgive me, Maester. I was curious. Curiosity is no sin. Aemon resumed stitching, his needle moving in steady rhythm. Though yours seems particularly focused. What would you like to know? The question tumbled out before Robb could stop it. How did you end up here? At the wall. Aemon's ancient face creased in what might have been a smile. Such an innocent question, yet so few dare ask it. His fingers tied off the last stitch with a delicate knot. I was offered a crown once. Twice, actually. The Iron Throne was mine by rights when my brother died. But I had already sworn my vows to the Citadel, and when they offered again, well, I chose chains of a different sort. He gestured to his Maester's chain, the metals clicking softly. My brother Aegon became king instead. Aegon the Unlikely, they called him. A good man, better than I would have been. Power. It does things to men. I feared what it might do to me. So you came here? Robb couldn't hide his amazement. To choose the wall over the Iron Throne. Eventually, after many years of service, when I was no longer young and my eyes began to fail, the Night's Watch needed a Maester, and I needed a place where the Game of Thrones could not reach me. Aemon applied a salve to PYP's wound, the sharp scent of pine and something medicinal filling the air. There, young PYP. Keep it clean and it will heal well. PYP touched the bandage gingerly. Thank you, Maester. He glanced at Gren. We should go. Got duties in the kitchens. Go on, Aemon said. And PYP? What Lord Stark taught you about footwork. Practice it. Your speed means nothing if you're off balance. PYP flushed but nodded, muttering thanks to Robb before he and Gren departed. Their footsteps faded down the stairs, leaving Robb alone with the ancient Targaryen. I'm glad, Aemon said, settling into his chair with a soft grunt. To see the next generation of Starks already helping the Watch. Your father would be proud. It's my duty. The Starks have always been friends to the Watch. Robb paused, choosing his words carefully. And with what's coming from beyond the wall, you'll need more than friends. You'll need every sword, every able body. Yes. Aemon's blind eyes seemed to look through him. The cold winds are rising. I feel it in these old bones. Death marches south, and we are so few. He trailed off, then fixed Robb with that unseen gaze that somehow saw everything. But that's not why you wanted to meet me, is it? Why did you really wish to speak with Aemon Targaryen? The question wasn't truly a question but a demand. Robb's mind raced. He'd been careless, too obvious in his interest. I wanted to meet another Targaryen, he admitted, the truth slipping out before wisdom could catch it. Aemon went very still. Another? You have met a Targaryen before? Robb's hand flew to his face. Gods, what had he done? Jon's secret, the thing that could see him killed if Robert ever learned. Robb stood abruptly, the chair scraping against stone. I should go. Lord Commander Mormont is expecting me. Lord Stark. Aemon's voice was gentle but insistent. What Targaryen have you met? Robb was already at the door, his hand on the latch. He looked back at the old maester, this last dragon who thought himself alone in the world, and felt the force pulling at him, demanding truth. You're not as alone as you think you are, Robb said quietly, and fled before he could make things worse. He took the stairs 3 at a time, his boots thundering against stone. Behind him, he left an old man sitting in silence, pale fingers trembling against the arms of his chair, blind eyes wide with a hope he'd thought long dead. Old Town, the Reach. Jon descended the narrow stairs from his room, the old wood groaning beneath his boots. The force prickled along his spine like cold fingers trailing down his back as he felt something was about to happen, but the feeling remained frustratingly vague. He'd learned to trust these warnings from Master Luke's training, yet this one felt different. Not danger exactly, but change. The common room's warmth hit him first, thick with the smell of bacon fat and fresh bread. His stomach growled in response. Through the morning crowd of merchants and travelers, he spotted his companions at a corner table. Luke sat facing the door, old habit from his stories about cantinas and imperial ambushes, while Jory cleaned his nails with a knife. Phalia gestured animatedly at something, her auburn hair catching the light from the window, and Alan watched her with the expression of a man who'd taken a blow to the head. Jon had barely settled into the empty seat when a serving girl appeared at his elbow, setting down a plate heaped with eggs, black sausage, and thick slices of bread still steaming from the ovens. He looked up in surprise to find Luke giving him a subtle wink before turning his attention back to Phalia. And the silk merchant's quarter, you should see it. Phalia's voice carried that particular excitement of someone discovering freedom for the first time. Colors I don't even have names for. This one merchant from E.T. had fabric that changed shade when you moved it, like oil on water but prettier. She touched Alan's arm briefly. Thank you again for accompanying me. I know watching me gawk at cloth for 3 hours wasn't exactly thrilling. Alan's ears turned red. Was no trouble, my lady? I'm no lady, Phalia said, but her smile took any sting from the words. Just Phalia. Jon cut into his sausage, letting their conversation wash over him. The happiness radiating from Phalia through the force felt like sitting near a hearth after coming in from the cold. She'd spent her whole life as Lord Hewitt's bastard shame, treated worse than a servant. Now, free to walk markets and speak her mind, Jon understood that feeling, or he thought he had before learning the truth about his parentage. What would his life have been in the South? Not as Ned Stark's bastard, but as a royal one? Would King Robert have even let him live long enough to wonder? The thought of spending his childhood in King's Landing, surrounded by Lannisters and their ilk, made bile rise in his throat. The Starks had given him everything: family, purpose, love despite Lady Stark's instances. Whatever his blood, Winterfell was home. But here's the interesting part, Phalia said, her tone shifting from delight to gossip. The merchants were all talking about Stannis Baratheon. Apparently he's vanished from court entirely. Just up and sailed to Dragonstone without a word to anyone. Not even his brother the king. Jory looked up from his knife. Stannis never struck me as one for court life anyway. Probably got tired of watching Robert drink himself stupid. Perhaps, but the timing. Phalia leaned forward conspiratorially. The Tyrells are throwing this massive tourney for Renly Baratheon and Margaery Tyrell's betrothal, except now they're rushing to make it a wedding instead. And Lord Mace is bringing half the Reach's nobility, but Lord Leighton Hightower won't even attend his own granddaughter's wedding. Only his heir, Baelor, will represent House Hightower. Someone's in a hurry to see this marriage consummated, Jory said with a knowing grin. Phalia's response made Jon nearly choke on his eggs. From what I overheard when my father entertained other Reach lords, it might not be Lord Renly who's eager. They say he doesn't have a preference for women, if you understand my meaning. Jory's knife stopped moving. Alan's mouth fell open. Luke just continued eating his porridge, apparently unbothered by the implications. Jon felt heat rise to his face but squashed it. Not my problem. The merchants had more news, Phalia continued, clearly enjoying their reactions. About the Dragon Princess. Jon's head snapped up so fast his neck cracked. Daenerys Targaryen. She ran away from her wedding in Pentos. Fled in the night with Ser Jorah Mormont, of all people. No one knows where she went, and her brother, the one they call the Beggar Prince, he's vanished too. Some say he's dead, others that he's hunting her. The eggs lost their flavor in Jon's mouth. Daenerys Targaryen, his sire's sister. His aunt, though she was younger than him if the stories were true. His family, scattered across the narrow sea while he sat here eating breakfast, pretending to be Torrhen Karstark. His hands clenched around his knife and fork. The Force responded to his emotion, making the pitcher of ale on their table tremble slightly. Luke's hand moved casually, steadying it before anyone noticed. "Time we left for the Citadel," Luke said, his tone mild but his eyes finding Jon's with understanding. "We have a full day ahead." Jon nodded stiffly, forcing himself to finish the last of his bread. Jory and Luke rose, checking their sword belts out of habit. As they moved toward the door, Luke fell into step beside Jon. "We'll find them," Luke whispered, his voice barely audible. "Your family, after we stop what's coming from beyond the wall. But we need to focus on the task at hand." Jon wanted to argue, wanted to demand they sail for Pentos immediately, but he knew Master Luke was right. The dead were rising. His siblings, his cousins, needed him. The realm needs to prepare. He gave a reluctant nod. The morning sun nearly blinded him as they stepped outside. Jon raised a hand to shield his eyes, then froze. An elaborate carriage waited at the inn's entrance, all polished wood and brass fittings, with the Hightower sigil painted on its doors. The carriage door opened. All Eras stepped out first, dressed in the same acolyte robes from yesterday. Behind him, Jon reminded himself, came a short, thick man with the heaviest chain Jon had ever seen on a maester. But what caught Jon's attention were the strange glass circles perched on the man's nose, held in place by a wire frame. They made his eyes appear larger, like a fish peering through clear ice. Jon and Jory shifted instinctively into defensive stances, but Master Luke remained perfectly still, radiating calm through the Force. The maester waddled toward them with surprising speed for his girth. "Torrhen Karstark, I presume?" His voice was deep and rough, like stones grinding together. "I am Archmaester Marwyn, though most call me Marwyn the Mage, usually while making signs against evil." He chuckled at his own words. "Well met, Archmaester," Jon replied, slipping into his role. "We were just on our way to see you at the Citadel. You didn't need to trouble yourself coming here." Marwyn laughed, a sound like boulders tumbling down a mountain. "Oh, it's no trouble at all, young lord. Though I'm not exactly here to escort you to the Citadel." His gaze shifted to Luke, and something passed between them that Jon couldn't read. "Then why are you here?" Jon asked, suspicion creeping into his voice. Marwyn continued staring at Luke, who stared back with that unsettling stillness he sometimes adopted. The silence stretched until all Eras cleared her throat and elbowed the Archmaester in his substantial gut. "Ah, yes." Marwyn blinked as if waking from a dream. "There's a condition to your access to the Citadel archives. Lord Leighton Hightower wishes to meet you." Jon's stomach dropped. Had word of Oakenshield reached here already? Lord Hewitt would have sent ravens about his bastard daughter's escape, about the mysterious sorcerer who'd collapsed a dock with his hand. "I'm certain Lord Leighton has better uses for his time," Jon said smoothly. "I am merely a scholar seeking knowledge about the North's history. Nothing that would interest the Lord Hightower." Marwyn's smile widened. "Oh, I doubt that very much, Lord Torrhen. I doubt that very much indeed." He glanced at Luke again. "But you see, Lord Leighton is the one who secured permission for you to access our archives. The Seneschal wasn't inclined to allow strangers into our halls, particularly from my asking." Luke raised his hand slightly, a gesture Jon had seen him use before. "You don't need Lord Leighton's permission. You'll take us to the archives yourself." The Force rippled outward from Luke, that subtle push that could convince weak minds to see things differently. Jon had watched it work on guards, merchants, even knights. Marwyn stood there, unaffected. The silence stretched. A dog barked somewhere. A cart rolled past, wheels creaking. All Eras coughed. Marwyn finally said, those enlarged eyes blinking behind his strange glass circles. "As I was saying, Lord Leighton arranged your access. I don't have the authority to override the Seneschal's decision. If you want into the archives, you'll need to meet with Lord Leighton." He leaned forward, voice dropping to a whisper. "Particularly if you want access to the restricted sections. This is the only way you'll find what you're looking for. What's coming from the north. The old books remember. Jon and Luke exchanged glances. Through their training bond, Jon felt Luke's curiosity warring with caution. Finally, Jon turned back to Marwyn and nodded. "Lead the way, Archmaester." As they followed Marwyn and all eras toward the carriage, Jon whispered, "Master, let's see where this leads." Luke replied quietly, "There's more to this Lord Leighton than expected. But don't worry, I'm here if anything happens." Jon sighed. Nothing was ever simple. The carriage ride through Old Town streets gave Jon time to study Marwyn more closely. The Archmaester hummed tunelessly, those glass circles catching the light as he turned his head to peer at various landmarks. All eras sat silent, dark eyes watchful. The high tower loomed larger with each turn, until it blocked out half the sky. Jon had to crane his neck to see its top, wreathed in clouds. The base was ancient black stone, fused together like the foundation of Storm's End, while the upper levels were more recent construction, though still older than Winterfell. They didn't enter through the main gates. Instead, Marwyn directed the driver to a small door set into the base, nearly invisible unless you knew where to look. Inside, a narrow stair spiraled upward into darkness. Marwyn paused at the base of the spiral stair, turning to Jory. "Best you wait here, lad. Lord Leighton only requested for 2 new visitors." Jon caught Jory's questioning look and gave a slight nod. The guard's jaw tightened. He'd sworn to Ned Stark to protect Jon after all. But he stepped back, hand resting on his sword pommel. "I'll be right here, Lord," Jory said, the formal address carrying weight. His northern accent thickened with displeasure. "These stairs look treacherous enough without me clanking about in mail." Marwyn's laugh echoed off stone. "Wise man, we've had knights try to climb in full plate. Found one wedged between levels once, couldn't go up or down. Had to butter him like a stuck pig." All eras made a soft sound that might have been amusement. That was Ser Morin. Still won't eat butter to this day. "Lord Leighton hasn't descended from the tower in over a decade," Marwyn explained as they climbed. "He prefers his solitude, studying the heavens and consulting his books." Jon caught Alaraz's eye as they approached the narrow stair. "You're coming with us?" Alaraz's mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Wouldn't miss this for the world." His Dornish accent thickened slightly, vowels stretching. "Besides, someone needs to make sure Maester Marwyn doesn't forget which door leads where. Last visit ended up in the rookery. Took me some time to wash the bird shit from his hair." The spiral stairs were barely wide enough for one person. Jon's shoulders scraped against rough stone with each turn, and the air grew colder as they climbed, despite the summer heat outside. Behind him, Alaraz's soft footfalls barely whispered against the steps, like a hunter's tread or an assassin's. The darkness pressed close, broken only by occasional arrow slits that let in threads of dusty light. Through one, Jon glimpsed the city spreading below like a child's toy model. "Fair warning," all eras murmured, close enough that Jon could smell the faint trace of wine on his breath. "Lord Leighton can be quite particular." "Particular how?" Jon asked, the words coming out sharper than intended. With that smile again, all eras responded. "You'll see." Jon's jaw tightened. "Your smile isn't exactly filling me with confidence." "Good." Alaraz's voice carried a thread of amusement. "Confidence makes men stupid. Lord Leighton prefers his visitors properly nervous." Jon's legs burned by the time they reached a landing several hundred steps up. Marwyn, despite his girth, seemed barely winded. Luke moved with that easy grace that suggested he could climb for hours more. The door opened into a circular chamber filled with more books than Jon had ever seen outside the Winterfell library. They covered every wall, reached the vaulted ceiling, and stood in precarious stacks on every surface. A man stood at the far window, tall and lean despite his advanced age, silver hair falling to his shoulders. He turned as they entered, and Jon saw eyes the color of spring grass, sharp and knowing. "Lord Leighton," Marwyn said with a slight bow. "May I present Torrhen Karstark and his companion." "Luke Skywalker," Luke said, offering no false name. Jon couldn't hide his surprise at Luke. What is Master doing? The Force thrummed against his consciousness as he tried desperately to reach him, to warn into using their agreed-upon false names. "Please, Lord Snow." The old lord's green eyes sparkled with something between amusement and calculation. "There's no need for false pretenses between friends. I would have loved to see those direwolves of yours. Ghost and Amidala, was it? Shit." Blood roared in his ears, drowning out everything except the rapid thud of his own heartbeat. He looked desperately around the chamber. Marwen's face split in a knowing grin, all eras watching with those dark eyes that saw too much, and Luke stood perfectly still, one eyebrow raised in what might have been surprise or approval. Jon turned back to Lord Leighton, forcing his voice steady despite the panic clawing at his throat. "My lord, I fear you're mistaken. I'm not." The words died as warmth brushed against his left side. A woman stood there, though Jon would swear on the old gods she hadn't been there a heartbeat ago. She moved with liquid grace, as her hair fell in silver waves past her waist. She looked at Luke with an expression of profound fascination, as if he were a puzzle she'd been trying to solve for centuries. "The Walker of Stars," she breathed, her voice carrying harmonics that made Jon's teeth ache. "The Son of Suns, the Herald of Balance." She tilted her head, studying Luke as if she found the most intrigued book to read. "It is my very great pleasure to meet you at last." Master Luke's entire body had shifted into a combat stance so subtle Jon only recognized it from their training. Every muscle coiled, ready to spring. The force around him felt suddenly sharp, dangerous, like the air before lightning strikes. "And you are?" Luke's voice carried that particular flatness Jon had learned meant extreme caution. But the woman had already turned away, dismissing the most dangerous man Jon knew as if he were furniture. Her star-filled gaze fixed on Jon, and her smile bloomed wider, showing teeth that gleamed like pearls. "And you?" She glided closer, close enough that Jon could smell her perfume. "It is my great honor to meet you, my prince." The floor seemed to tilt beneath Jon's boots. His knees wanted to buckle. This couldn't be happening. They'd been so careful. "What?" The word burst from Jon's throat, raw and strangled, while Luke's sharper "what?" cut through the air like a blade. Marwen's deeper rumble joined theirs, overlapping with Alaris's higher pitch, all four voices colliding in a discordant chorus of disbelief. Lord Leighton's own "what?" came last, soft and wondering, as if he just watched the sun rise in the west. The woman's laughter rippled through the chamber like silver bells, like breaking glass, like the sound dragons might make if they could laugh. She pressed one delicate hand to her chest in mock surprise, those star-filled eyes dancing with mirth. "Oh my," she said, looking between their stunned faces with obvious delight. "Have I said something unexpected?"